Since you've made enough of a mess, is it our turn to step in? The association guards have been watching from the first blow. By rule, they let scuffles run their course unless lives or property were at risk. With no deaths, no damage, and only Leguna's left arm bruised, they finally moved to hand out penalties. I think everyone here, even Kurdak, can admit the boy struck first, Orwin said smoothly. I only defended myself. I've seen shameless men, but you take the prize, Kurdak snapped. Defending yourself? You almost killed him. He faced the guards. This started with me and Orwin. The kid wasn't the cause. Did the boy throw the first punch? The guard asked. It was all he cared about. Yes, but that's enough, the guard cut in. He comes with us. We'll handle the rest here. Wait, Kurdak said, stepping in his way. This is on me. The guard's brow tightened. Move. Vera stepped up beside Kurdak. He's the least involved. I fought too. Take me. The guard looked from one to the other. His eyes cooled. Are you obstructing the association? No, Vera said quietly, steady as iron. But you aren't taking him like this. Leguna exhaled and eased them aside. I started it. Take me. Shut it, Lay. Kurdak barked, grabbing for him. He knew the association's reputation. Even the roughest mercenaries left their halls quiet and pale, and no one spoke of what happened inside. Boss, it's fine, Leguna said, slipping past to face the guard. If I come, they're clear, right? The guard couldn't help respecting that. He nodded. Yes, you started it. You take the punishment. The others pay a small fine. Then let's go, Leguna said. Lay, get back here. Kurdak lunged, but the guard caught his wrist. Easy, the guard warned softly, scanning the tense mercenaries nearby. Push this, and it gets worse for all of you. Kurdak ground his teeth. If anything happens to him, what will you do? The guard said, rolling his eyes. You cannot beat me. You? Kurdak, Vera said, pulling him back. This is the best we'll get. Kurdak met Leguna's eyes. The boy nodded once and went with the guards. I hope the brat makes it back, Orwin drawled. Serves him right for being reckless. Orwin, Kurdak growled, flexing his hands. Knuckles popped inside his gloves. He stripped them off and flung them into Orwin's chest. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A thrown glove was a duel demand. In Starfall, the Federation's laws were thin armor. Fighters settled matters themselves. If the challenge picked up the glove, the duel was on, with place, time, and terms set by the challenged. Orwin smiled. This was what he wanted. He had no real feud with Kurdak, but something about the big man set his teeth on edge. Kurdak, Vera whispered, alarmed. She'd seen enough to know he was a hair weaker. He only gave her a small, calming smile. Orwin bent and lifted the gloves. The association will witness. 3 days from now, Eastgate. Any weapon. No poison, Vera said sharply. If she couldn't stop it, she could at least shape the terms. Fine, Orwin said, confident. As for victory, fight to the death, Kurdak snapped. Orwin's grin turned mean. Agreed. You're crazy, Vera hissed, clutching his arm. Orwin was Moonshadow. Tricks within tricks. A death match tilted the board his way. Leguna, halfway to the door with the guards, froze. He had felt Orwin's strange movement once. Without Enlace, he would be a corpse. A normal duel, Kurdak could win. A death match was another story. Boss, what are you doing? Leguna rushed back. You told me to think before I act. Why bet your life? Go take your punishment, Kurdak said, shaking him off. This is my choice. Boss, he's too dangerous. The guards hauled Leguna away. Any other requests? Orwin asked, all mock courtesy. Kurdak shook his head. No. Then I'll collect your life in 3 days, Orwin said, turning away. Kurdak snorted and walked off with Vera. You're too impulsive, she murmured. I know his kind, Kurdak said, smiling faintly. And I'm not the only one who's improved. I've reached 9th stratum. Thinking. Inside the Starfall Association's branch office. So, you want me to release him? Just like that. Corden asked, smiling pleasantly. A young woman stood before him, a Moonshadow badge gleaming at her chest. He didn't recognize her, but the badge's rank was high enough to keep even a branch manager polite. Only Ariko's carries one like that, he thought. Did he send her? Yes, Enlace said, voice cool. I apologize for the disturbance, but both Leguna and Orwin are Moonshadow. We'd rather avoid complications. If you release him, we'll handle discipline internally. You'll have a result that satisfies you. Corden doubted they owed the association any result. But what truly snagged him was why a rookie errand runner had the attention of Moonshadow's upper floors. He sighed. You may not know our structure. Punishments aren't under my branch. They're independent. This happened in Starfall? Yes, but you'll need to convince the punishment office, not me. Annalot's eyes flicked toward the door guards, then back. One slim brow rose. Forgive me. She traced a few quick signs. Pale light pulsed at her fingertips. The guards stiffened, hands twitching toward hilts. Corden waved them down. As a 13th stratum magus, he recognized the simplest of sharing spells. Best discussed privately. Her voice sounded in his mind. Go on, he replied, initiating the link himself. You've guessed from the badge who sent me. Sir Arikos? I've heard only he bears one of that rank, Corden answered. A flicker of mischief warmed Annalot's eyes. Correct. This is Sir Arikos's badge. Then his intention is... Corden's stomach tightened. The chief executive of Moonshadow was not a name one heard idly. Nothing dramatic, Mr. Corden. A debt from his youthful indiscretions. Years ago in Starfall, he fell for a certain girl. I'll spare you details. In short, Leguna is what remains of that affair. Sir Arikos sent me to tidy things up. Ah, I see, Corden said aloud, the spell dropping of its own accord. Outwardly, he stayed composed. Inwardly, panic skittered. That's not nothing. That's a scandal with the shadowed god of death's name stamped across it. Why did you say it out loud? Why to me? He cleared his throat. Let's fetch the boy. If we hurry, he won't have come to any harm. Please wait, and Latte said, meeting his sea-green eyes. Leguna doesn't know. I can't be seen. Have someone bring him to the inn and say nothing of this to him. Oh, of course. He nodded too quickly. I didn't hear anything and won't remember anything. Sir Arikos has nothing to worry about. I swear. Then I'll leave in your hands, Mr. Corden. Thank you. Sir Arikos will remember this favor. Cold sweat prickled his back. No need. Truly. An honor to help. Nothing worth remembering. Thank you for your help, she said, still ice-toned, and slipped out. Move. Corden barked the moment she was gone. We're releasing the boy. Leguna sat in the basement, nursing yet another cup of water. He'd expected a beating. Instead, nothing. The cell was clean. The water was free. He was bored. The delay wasn't malice. The association was tallying trouble and sorting penalties. They prided themselves, ironically, on being fair before the bruises began. A transparent process made fewer enemies. Clack! The gate swung open. A middle-aged man in a pale gray mage's robe stepped in. Corden. He studied the boy. Slender, forgettable frame. Perfect for slipping through crowds. Those eyes, sharp, a little dangerous. Arikos' son through and through, Corden decided, inventing a likeness from rumor and fear. Leguna squirmed under the stare. Is this my punishment? Being looked at until I go mad? Is this some kind of mind spell? Or maybe I just drank too much water. You're free to go, Corden said, unclasping the chains himself. Leguna blinked. That's it. Go. He nodded to a guard. Escort him out. Don't mention my name. No explanations. As Leguna was led away, Corden reformed the sharing spell for a heartbeat. If anyone asks, I know nothing. Leguna gave him a puzzled look and, wisely, just nodded.
Hey everyone, Firescale Audiobooks here. If there's a novel you'd love to hear more of, you can support us on Patreon or Ko-fi. Depending on your tier, I'll make extra parts just for the stories you're most excited about. Usually I can only upload 4 to 5 parts of each novel, but with your support, we can go beyond that. And of course, don't forget to hit subscribe. It helps more than you know.
Are you that confident for the upcoming duel? Even though Kurdak said he had already broken through to the 9th stratum, Vera couldn't help but worry. His opponent was a psycho like Orwin, after all. That was why she confronted him about the matter yet again back at the inn. I won't say I'm absolutely certain, but at the very least, my chances of winning are 50%, confessed Kurdak as he stretched out all his fingers on his huge, rough palm. Heck, does that mean there's half a chance he'll kill you? Asked Vera anxiously. Hey, don't get so worked up, okay? Isn't there half a chance I can get rid of him as well? Countered Kurdak nonchalantly. What would you rather I do? Sit quietly and watch you commit suicide in 3 days? We lost Cyrano's just a few days ago, and here I thought Leguna, and I could count on you. I didn't think you'd bet your life this rashly. No one knows what'll happen in 3 days. What would we do if something really happened to you? How could you do something so irresponsible? Seeing Kurdak's carefree expression only made her anger grow. She had only wanted to advise him a little at first, but she found herself acting more emotionally as she went on until tears welled up in her eyes. Kurdak didn't think she would react so emotionally either. After a short pause, he brought her, on the edge of crying, into his embrace. Girl, don't you understand me? I wouldn't place my bets on something I wasn't reasonably confident in winning. Don't worry, I have no plans to ditch the two of you, consoled he gently. After spending so much time with Vera, he'd come to understand that when the gung-ho and brash woman opened her heart and shared her thoughts, it was a sign she'd been shocked quite severely. Sniff. Kurdak, I'm scared. I'm really scared. My family left me all of a sudden, and now even Cyrano's is gone. I'm scared one day you'll leave me as well. What if I end up all alone? I've always thought of myself as a useless wench for running away to save myself, abandoning my brother, and letting Cyrano's die for my sake. And you almost died to save me as well. Everyone I know dies for my sake, and I can't do anything about it. I'm so useless, cried Vera in his arms. Her tears soaked his chest. Kurdak patted her shoulders lightly. Now don't spout crap. You're not useless at all. If not for you, Cyrano's and I would have died several times over. Look, your family's deaths didn't have anything to do with you. Neither did Cyrano's. It's all the orc's fault. Stop blaming yourself. This isn't like the dragon I know. Thanks to his efforts, Vera gradually regained her calm. After she snapped out of it, she realized she'd been in Kurdak's embrace for quite a while. Her face flushed, and she tried to wriggle free. When Kurdak saw her struggle and noticed the red blush on her cheeks, the urge to tease her burst into his head. His arms tensed, and he tightened his grip. What's wrong? You leap into my arms, cry like a little kitten, and think you can just leave after doing your business? In your dreams. Kurdak had a mischievous smile on his not-so-handsome face. Vera felt the heat burn her cheeks and struggled even harder. If you hug me first. I didn't leap into your arms. Let me go now. Nope. You'll have to get out by yourself. Let me go. I'll bite you, you hear? Vera's razor-sharp canines were already visible. Go ahead. I have werewolf's blood in me now. Maybe drinking my blood will make a missy wolf out of you. Yep, it'll suit you much better. Come on, bite me, teased Kurdak as he brought his muscled, hairy arms to Vera's mouth. When she heard mention of werewolves, her expression darkened even more, but she stopped struggling. Kurdak cursed himself for opening Pandora's box of his own accord. Hey, there's nothing to worry about. I won't die that easily. The potion's side effect is troublesome, but it's not all bad. It's a great boon for the duel, said he hurriedly. You don't need to try and console me, Vera sighed. I know, don't worry. I'll do my best to help you escape the curse. I owe you this much. You both. You won't mind if I claim part of the debt now? Kurdak lowered his head slowly as he asked. Vera hesitated when she saw his face come closer, but, in the end, she gave in and closed her eyes. Her nerves shot with electric bolts as their lips touched. It felt weird for her tender skin to brush against the stubs of Kurdak's shaven beard and mustache. The sensations overwhelmed her. Her heart beat a mile a minute. Kurdak was no expert either. He cast away what little reservations he had crudely and mashed his head against Vera's ever harder. He fought clumsily to taste as much of her as he could. Knock, knock, knock. 3 knocks fell on the door at the least opportune moment. Kurdak's brow furrowed at the disruption. What, Barty? If it was one of the inn staff, he wouldn't hesitate to ream the bastard properly. Boss, Nope, Leguna said, shaking his head before it came back to him. Oh, he told me he didn't know anything. Didn't know? What doesn't he know? Don't know. Yeah, I want to know what he doesn't know. Don't know. I know he doesn't know. What I want to know is what he doesn't know. I already said I don't know. Stop repeating that you don't know. What doesn't he know? Boss, I know what you want to know, but you don't know what I'm trying to get at. I don't know what he doesn't know. Ugh, I think I'm getting the idea. What is this about? I don't know. Kurdak organized his thoughts in silence. You just drank tea all afternoon? If I'm not forgetting anything major, yes. Leguna even began to suspect his memory might have been tampered with to make him forget any painful experiences. Your luck is really something else, said Kurdak. His mind was working harder than it had in a long while. Moonshadow must have had something to do with it. While he wasn't sure who Arikos really was, he knew enough about the man's behavior to guess his strength. It went without saying that he was a high-order assassin. Even though Lance's people were considerably stronger than Chino's on average, anyone of any job who had interactions with high-order individuals undoubtedly stood at the top of the pyramid of power. And for Leguna to garner the attention of a high-order fighter that had to go through the trouble of dealing with Leguna matters, it was obvious he was someone of importance to Moonshadow. Moonshadow must have had a hand in getting Leguna released so soon. Why are you overthinking this? All that matters is Lei is fine, interjected Vera, much relieved to see him return unharmed. Yup, agreed Kurdak. He didn't reveal his conjecture. Knock, knock, knock. The door rumbled again. Kurdak looked at the other, too confused. Who would knock on their door at this hour? I'll go look, said Leguna, who was closest to the door. When he opened it, the face so beautiful it stupefied him met his eyes once again. Good day, said Enlate expressionlessly. Good day, muttered Leguna, dazed. During the fight at noon, Leguna only managed to look at Enlate from afar. Given the chaotic situation, he didn't have the leisure of looking at a girl as beautiful as her. Even so, he couldn't help but be surprised by her looks now that she was up close. Her short, light blue hair and intricately shaped face made her emanate a unique aura difficult to describe. She was cold, yet commanded respect. She seemed confident, yet not overbearingly proud. Her cool demeanor belied her quick wit. All in all, the beautiful girl made quite the impression on him, a really deep one. Even though they'd already met once earlier in the day, he still fell into a daze after seeing her again. Annalot's facial features were sculpted to perfection. A single look told you she couldn't have a human originator. Only nature could create such beautiful lines and meld them together flawlessly. Her skin was fairer than most, like the first bright drops of snow that fell on tree branches. Beneath her fair skin was a shade of light pink that made her look less pale than she would have with her abnormally fair skin. Being stimulated visually from such a short distance overwhelmed Leguna. Currently, he was trying hard to snap himself out of his stupor. May I enter? Asked Enlate with a tone that sounded more like a query of fact than a request. Oh, of course. Please come in, answered Leguna hurriedly after he snapped out of his stupor. Thank you. Enlate chilled those around her. Leguna, right next to her, somehow felt every one of her breaths carried a hint of coolness. Oh, it's the magus from earlier. Welcome, greeted Kurdak warmly. Many thanks for what you did, said Vera in a friendly manner. Since Enlate had saved Leguna's life at the very last moment, Vera's impression of her was rather good. Leguna had tried to say something, but both welcome and gratitude had already been expressed by Kurdak and Vera. After a long period of thought, he could only think of one thing to say. Please sit down. Enlate found herself a spot and looked at the three before she introduced herself. Good day. I'm Enlate. Ah, Miss Enlate, thank you so much for lending us a hand. Our little friend would have been in great danger otherwise. Oh, apologies for my rudeness. I'm Kurdak. This is Leguna, and this here is Vera. We're all mercenaries. Kurdak understood how great the young maiden's power was and didn't dare to take too much of her time. I know your names already. Please don't misunderstand. I wasn't spying on you or anything. It's just that you're quite well known in Starfall, explained Enlate. I wonder why you came, Miss Enlate, asked Kurdak. The manner in which the girl performed during the incident earlier in the day was still fresh in his mind. He'd wanted to visit her personally with Vera to thank her, but neither could find her no matter where they went. In the end, they had to give up. It made him even more curious now that she was right in front of them. She nodded. Since you're all here, I'll be straightforward. You all three have to agree. I'd like to join your mercenary party. Huh? Kurdak, Vera, and Leguna were flabbergasted. They'd never considered she might wish to join their party. Kurdak had already prepared to express his gratitude and think of some ways he could make up for her troubles. After all, she had saved Leguna's life, so if Analot's request wasn't too excessive, he was prepared to help her out with whatever she needed. What Enlate said was completely out of their expectations. Kurdak wondered why the magus of at least the 11th stratum wanted to join their little mercenary party. It was common knowledge that magi were the rarest class in the world. Apart from those apprentices who only knew how to cast eye-catching but impractical level 0 tricks, magi were generally rich and arrogant people. Not only did they feel associating and working with lowly fighters was beneath them, they wouldn't desire the measly reward mercenary missions could offer. So, magi were a rare breed among the many members of the association. The reason for the high status of magi, apart from their relative rarity, was their ability to call on the power of the elements to wreak havoc. A magus could easily suppress other classes, even if they were on the same stratum. It was also common to hear of situations where magi defeat enemies of slightly higher strata than them. There were none that doubted the fact that magi were the scariest people in the world. It was obvious in the case of Eye of Arcana. The Eye was the faction with the smallest number of members, only a fourth of the associations, yet they were able to control a quarter of all the influence in Lance. It was mainly due to the fact that 3/4 of all magi on the continent belonged to the Eye. In actuality, apart from Moonshadow Thieves, which had a Saint Order fighter as their leader, which allowed them to deal with the Eye on equal footing, the other factions often humbled themselves as testament to the fearsome power of the small faction, and by extension, of magi. Kurdak didn't suspect that, even if the three of them ganged up against her, once Enlate gained some distance, both Kurdak and Leguna would be helpless targets. Only Vera would pose some form of threat to the Magus girl. Yet, someone who had the power to crush their whole party actually wanted to join it? It was like a piece of delicious biscuit had fallen from the sky. It was practically a gift from the heavens, the mere prospect of which was so unreal the three doubted their hearing. That's right. I want to join your party and become a mercenary, repeated Enlate with a cold voice. She did not react to their surprised stares at all. After making his hearing was really fine, Kurdak began to consider the matter seriously. It goes without saying our party's ability decreased quite considerably after losing an all-rounder like Cyrano's. It would be helpful if someone this strong joined our group. But why would someone like her want to join us in the first place? Thought Kurdak cautiously. He was no idiot blinded by the slightest benefit. There had to be some sort of reason for Analot's sudden request. May I know why you wish to join us? Please forgive my frankness, but while our party could do with an additional member or two, and you definitely qualify, your abrupt request is a little, well, explained Kurdak in as careful a manner as he could. Enlate nodded. I understand your concerns. It's not like this is something I have to hide. My current teacher is a high-order magus living in seclusion here in Starfall. He started teaching me magic after seeing my talent when I was 4. I've already been learning for 12 years, and my teacher feels I've done quite well. He wants me to go out adventuring and train myself. He said I can only advance through facing life-threatening hardships and challenges. So, after looking around, I felt your party has a rather good reputation, so I want to join. Ah, I see. Kurdak lowered his head in thought before looking at Vera and Leguna. No problem. I don't mind, said Leguna without hesitation as he nodded, so hard his head felt like mush. Vera looked at him for a moment. I'm fine too. I'll be glad to have another girl in the party to talk to, not to mention one as cute as you. Kurdak looked Enlate in the eye. He understood Vera had a reason for saying so much. It was all too common for magi to develop odd personalities after being praised and sucked up to for long periods of time. That was probably why Enlate acted so cold. Vera intentionally called her cute because she wanted to see her reaction and check her personality. If Enlate flipped out angrily after being regarded as a child, Kurdak would not accept her. After all, They would have to spend quite some time together and rely on each other in all sorts of situations. If they had to pay attention to the words they said every single moment, their party wouldn't last. Fortunately, Kurdak was relieved to see Latte retain her cool composure. I have no objection either. However, before we finalize this, there are some conditions we have to discuss. Kurdak saw that it would soon be dinner time and wanted to settle the matter as soon as possible since a powerful magus was always in high demand. If their party could have one, many doors would open for them. Please feel free to state them. I'll be okay with them if they're not excessive, said Latte. They discussed briefly the details of Anilot's share of rewards, her estimated ability, as well as the difficulty of missions the party should take on following her participation. In the end, it was decided that she would have the same share Cyrano's had, 1/4. Even though it was greatly unfair to the one who should be the strongest on the team, and Latte said her share was more than enough to cover the materials she'd need for her spells, which was enough for her since she joined with the express goal to train. As for missions, out of consideration for Leguna, a 6th-stratum rookie thief, Kurdak decided they would start with simpler missions so no one would be endangered. And Latte didn't have any objections. She explained she had lived all her life with her teacher and didn't have any real-life combat experience. So taking missions of moderate difficulty was just right for her. After discovering how easy it was to negotiate with the mid-order magus, the three couldn't help but feel fond of the cool, beautiful girl. Aside from her cold tone and expressionless face when she spoke, she got around pretty well with others. Apart from being slightly more talkative than Cyrano's, she was practically a female version of him, allowing the party to feel all the more familiar with her, given their recent loss. Well then, welcome to our party, welcomed Kurdak with an outstretched hand. And Latte hesitated for a moment, but held hands with all three in the end. Each of the hands felt slightly different to her. Kurdak's was rough and huge, and Vera's fine and soft. Leguna's was as rough as Kurdak's despite its small size, much to her surprise. Welcome, welcome. Holding Anilot's fair and soft hand, slightly cold to the touch, Leguna couldn't help but feel a rush of excitement. Where will you live, Annie? Why don't you move in with us? Asked Vera. She was already really delighted by the cold beauty and even referred to her with a nickname. Apologies, I have my own place in the city. It's a little too noisy for me here. I'm afraid I won't be able to settle in if I were to stay here, refused Latte with a hint of difficulty, though not the least dissatisfied with Vera's new nomenclature. Oh, forget it then. Vera didn't mind the refusal since she had brought it up on a whim in the first place. After all, the inn was filled with rowdy fighters and mercenaries and almost no magi, especially not one as pretty as Latte. I'm really sorry. My teacher doesn't appreciate company, so I can't tell you where I live either. But you may reach me through this crystal. Just infuse it with some impetus, and I will be able to tell your location, said Latte, as she handed Kurdak a green crystal. It was a contact crystal the three had seen before in luxurious magic item shops. Though it was convenient for sending messages and determining positions, its astronomical price, 500 gold coins each, disappointed them. They didn't think Latte would casually toss them one out of nowhere. The mercenaries once again marveled at how rich magi were. After seeing Kurdak put the contact crystal away with extreme care, Latte decided she had finished doing what she came for and took her leave. I didn't think our party would attract such a powerful magus, began Vera as she toyed around with the crystal. True, agreed Kurdak as he looked at the charmed Leguna, intrigued. He couldn't help but feel Anilot's arrival had something to do with him and Moonshadow, but it wasn't like he could bring it to light. Since Moonshadow wouldn't harm them, he didn't think having such a strong new teammate was necessarily a bad thing. Lay, it's Sorum. You should be back in Starfall now, right? It's your shift tomorrow. Don't forget to report to the odd job department. A high-pitched voice announced in Leguna's mind. He realized the last time he was at the odd job department was almost 20 days ago. It seemed the next day would mark the day he changed from being a mere mercenary to being one of the weakest lackeys in the largest thieves guild on Lance. After another round of discussion about Kurdak's duel, due to take place in 3 days, during which Kurdak patted his own chest in confidence, assuring them he wouldn't lose, Vera and Leguna went to sleep reassured. The following evening, Leguna looked at the people below the roof. He couldn't help sneezing quietly. It was already winter, and his nose was completely blocked. It threatened to become runny if he didn't do anything. That morning, he headed to the odd job department as soon as he got up. The chubby Sorum assigned him his mission with a warm smile. It turned out to be an investigation into an affair concerning the son of Starfall's governor, Jord. Even though he was new to Starfall, Leguna was familiar with the man's name, mainly because Jord was a spoiled brat infamous for his arrogant behavior around the city. According to what he knew, Jord was forced by his family to marry the eldest daughter of the president of Starfall's largest merchant guild, Pangder. Jord had to be forced because his partner was the embodiment of ugliness and nagging combined. As the one he married wasn't to his taste, he set his sights elsewhere, given the hedonistic and luxurious lifestyle he was accustomed to. While he managed to find a way to deal with his predicament in his own manner, the not-so-good-looking wife he left at home wasn't too happy about it. The moment he received the mission briefing, Leguna had been kneeling at the entrance of the city hall, waiting for Jord to show up as he analyzed the briefing he was given. Leguna caught sight of the ruling family's scion in the afternoon. Leguna followed Jord's carriage through the city and came to a residential area not as populated as the others. After arriving, Jord rolled up his collar in fear of being recognized and entered a nondescript house with his attendants. Leguna could return and report his findings at that point. He had only been instructed to find out where Jord hid his mistress. However, he recalled Sorum's advice that the more details he could provide, the higher the reward he would receive. So, he scaled the building and made a peephole in the skylight to prepare for an additional night of observation. Though he had heard of some rougher men talking about lovemaking during his stay in the slums, he had never actually seen it before. As it was going to be the first time he actually got to see stuff like that after hearing so many stories about it, he felt both awkward and anticipation when he waited for the most pleasurable activity known to man to begin. But after waiting for half an hour in the cold, he began to feel the urge to curse at Jord. All this time, he could only see Jord with his two attendants. Since the building had 2 floors, he was able to see the 3 people vaguely from above. But after half an hour, all he could see was 3 people drinking tea as they chatted away, not doing anything noteworthy. Leguna wasn't within earshot and couldn't pick up what they were saying. It didn't help that his mind was numb from the cold breeze on the roof. He had wanted to leave, but chose to stay a bit longer the moment he thought of the additional gold he'd receive. And so, he took the risk and snuck inside. It'll be warmer inside, at the very least, thought he. The skylight faced the corridor on the 2nd floor. He pushed it open lightly and made his way inside. The rush of warm air made him feel much more comfortable. Leaning on the walkway railings, he hid in the shadows. Without the wind, he could finally eavesdrop on the conversation. Why are they not here yet? Even though Leguna couldn't actually see who was talking, he could tell from the arrogant tone that it must be Jord. "Young master, please be patient. They should be here any time now," calmed one of his attendants. "Oomph. I've paid them already, so I expect a satisfactory response. If they dare play any tricks," mused Jord threateningly. Someone rapped on the door at that very moment. Leguna stuck his head out curiously. He was really intrigued by the kind of woman able to bewitch a womanizer like Jord. She must have been extremely beautiful to make the rich heir wait for 30 minutes. Was she even prettier than Enlate? The moment the door opened, Leguna's mouth fell to the floor. It wasn't a peerless beauty, but a man. Leguna stared at the man who entered, confused. Even though he was tall and seemed attractive to most women, Leguna didn't think he would catch even Jord's attention. All of a sudden, he recalled rumors he'd heard among city folk that some nobles were known to be attracted to people of the same sex. He felt a little disturbed, like he was bathed in slime, and looked at Jord weirdly. So is he gay? Wondered he. He wondered whether he should leave. While he would have loved seeing how men and women did it, men doing the deed with each other wasn't exactly his cup of tea. However, he didn't dare leave just like that. Since he'd gone through so much trouble, if he didn't investigate the matter thoroughly, it would be troublesome when he submitted his report. Should he say that Jord's paramour was actually a man? He decided to confirm his suspicions before heading back. It didn't take long for him to realize his assumptions were mistaken. Jord didn't make any weird advances. He simply talked with him after showing him in. As the conversation developed, Leguna listened on in surprise. "Then, what demands do you guys have this time?" asked Jord. "Sir Baylor has already begun sowing the seeds of hatred among the orcs. Now, we need the humans to be enraged as well," said the man. "Get to the point. Tell me what he wants." "I have no time to figure out your little riddles." Jord cut him off, annoyed. "As you wish. Sir Baylor requests you began to stir up hate and anger amongst the humans against the orcs. If you're able to create public discord, it would be ideal," said the man. "Isn't it enough that the Eye is acting against the orcs? They've already eliminated 5 elite Orcish scout parties in Nightsong Forest," questioned Jord. When he heard this, Leguna immediately smelt something fishy. Ever since he had arrived in Starfall, the reliable Kurdak had been the one to deal with the smaller details of large and small matters. While Leguna couldn't be bothered to meddle with these, it didn't mean he was completely ignorant. Though he couldn't be considered mature after his many years in the slums, he was rather familiar with people's capacity for evil. The moment he left Nightsong Forest, he had begun to suspect the sudden appearance of orcs. According to Kurdak and Vera, the orcs had been rather docile in the 4 recent years, and there hadn't been any attacks. There was also the fact that the orc parties he saw in Nightsong weren't there to raid or pillage. It bothered him for quite a while, and he believed Kurdak had his own opinion on the matter, which he didn't share. After some fruitless pondering, he'd had no choice but to let the matter go. A small fry like him couldn't deal with the orcs' plots anyway. It would do him good to stay out of it instead of risking his life trying to restore it. And now he had unintentionally found the potential source of the problem, the man called Baylor. According to the conversation between the two and the information he heard from the Eyes party, he quickly deduced that the man called Baylor had begun instigating conflict between orcs and humans for some as yet unknown reason. The orcs in Nightsong were investigating the matter as well. Since they were provoked first, they had no scruples with attacking any humans they came across. His party was just one of their unfortunate victims. As for the humans, perhaps as the result of Baylor's actions, the Eyes sent their men over. Unfortunately, it only intensified the conflict. Now he had a rough grasp on what was going on. He was complete hostile towards Baylor. It was because of him that Vera and Leguna had experienced so many dangers, not to mention the curse Kurdak bore and Cyranos' death. While it wasn't necessarily Baylor's intent, every time Leguna thought about Cyranos' death, he felt a raging fire burn his heart. Fueled by the anger, Leguna began to breathe more heavily. He stared at the 4 men in the building, annoyed that he couldn't take action. He could take out Jord. While he had received some martial training, his subpar skills weren't even worth Leguna's consideration. However, he suspected the 2 attendants beside Jord weren't just normal servants. He didn't doubt Jord wouldn't bring along 2 people around with him all the time for no good reason. It still wasn't the most troubling, though. However, Leguna was most wary of the last man to enter the building. He had a subdued, but unmistakable, smell of blood which reminded him of the cold and insidious Orwyn. While he didn't seem as threatening as Orwyn, Leguna was definitely incapable of dealing with him. As he was pondering the new information he had, he didn't pay attention to the rest of the conversation. The moment he turned his attention back to the conversation, the 4 stopped talking all of a sudden. "Mr. Jord, did you bring anyone else with you?" asked the man after some thought. "I didn't." "Why do you ask?" "I believe you should be more careful in the future, so something like this doesn't happen again." The man's words made Leguna start with shock. All of a sudden, he could feel a cold awareness locked on him. Realizing that he had been discovered, he ran towards the skylight unhesitantly. However, the sound of a throwing knife cutting through air forced him to dodge and miss his opportunity to escape. "Such a young boy," mused the man, surprised, when he looked at Leguna. Leguna stared back at him without a word. His anxiety increased. All the experience he had with a fight with his life on the line was the time with the quick shadow drakes, and the time he helped Kurdak defeat the orcs. In the former, The enemy wasn't as strong and Kurdak was there to provide timely support. In the latter, he was doubtful whether the one who killed the orcs was really him. Seeing the killing intent ooze out of the man, Leguna feared he wouldn't get off easy. The two attendants also quickly approached. They looked at him cautiously. They weren't surprised at his age, though. Drawing Flameblade, he decided to fight even though he knew he didn't stand much of a chance. He stared coldly at the three before he launched his attack. He let his sixth stratum impetus explode wildly. The gust that ensued greatly surprised the three fighters in the room. He threw out 3 impetus-infused throwing knives. Infusing weapons with impetus was a skill he had always known, and, after perfected it with Kurdak's help, the knives would easily pierce a human body. The 3 men dodged, terrified. In that instant, Leguna leaped again, not for the skylight this time, but for the floor below. He quickly decided there was no way he could escape through the skylight. His only hope was to hold Jord hostage, which was why he jumped downstairs the moment he flung his knives. The 3 fighters downstairs were veterans filled with actual fighting experience. However, they had already prepared to deal with his plan. When he landed, the man who entered last already stood guard before Jord. At the same time, the other attendants blocked the entrance and sealed off all avenues of escape. The 3 didn't care about his identity and attacked the moment they surrounded him. They didn't even bother to say anything. For different impetus crossed the building. Regardless of how nimble Leguna was, he quickly revealed an opening under the pressure. He suffered a slash across his back. Fortunately, he had managed to dodge barely and avoided losing his arm. Terror filled his mind. He didn't think a stalking mission would end up with him trying to escape death. Regardless, it was too late for regrets. The 3 didn't seem intent on giving him a chance to explain and only wanted to silence him. Each and every one of their strikes was cruel and merciless. His wounds gradually increased, but he still didn't know how he could exit the building. Eventually, he started to lose the will to fight. One of the attendants grasped the opportunity to harness the most of his impetus and infuse it in his longsword during his horizontal slash. Leguna waved his dagger to block right away. While Flameblade was an enchanted weapon, its reach was far too short, and all he could do under the combined attack of the 3 was block and fight defensively. He began to panic when he realized there was no way he could hold on for long. The horizontal slash traveled so quick he wasn't able to evade in time and was forced to raise the dagger and circulate his impetus in an attempt to block. However, while the attendant was a warrior of the 6th stratum with impetus on par with his own, his muscles were far more developed. There was no way Leguna's thin limbs could block the strike completely. He lost his balance. As for the attendant's long sword, it snapped in half when it clashed against Flameblade. The 2 other enemies swooped in. One aimed to strike Leguna down immediately. Thunk! A dull sound rang out from the man's head as he felt as if he had knocked his head against the wall. The man's head felt wet. He reached up and touched the spot. When he looked at his hand, it was crimson. The 2 attendants quickly realized something was amiss and stopped their attacks. They stared at the wounded man. Before they realized what was happening, the front door had been opened. Outside, a blue-haired girl of impeccable beauty looked at them coldly. She came in the nick of time again, thought Leguna. He felt the urge to give her 2 kisses of gratitude when she came to his rescue. In fact, her arrival was a little too timely. Whether it was this time or the previous, during the fight in the association, Enlate would be there to rescue him in a moment of danger. He had long heard from the old guy that raised him about tales where the heroes saved the beautiful damsels, but he had never thought the trope would be inverted in his case, twice in the past 2 days at that. He didn't really qualify to be a hero yet. He was just a young brat. Despite that, he wasn't aversive to being rescued. Surviving was the most important thing, not to mention that his savior was such an amazing beauty. "Release him, and I will let you leave," said Enlate with her usual chilling tone. Leguna had wanted to greet her with a smile, but he realized she hadn't so much as glanced at him after she showed up. All she did was glare at the bleeding man behind him with her beautiful, pale blue eyes. He doubted whether she was even there to rescue him at all. The man looked at her, uncertainty burning in his eyes. He had long been instructed by Baylor before he returned to Starfall not to offend a select few people. The girl in front of him was one of them. He didn't know her name or much about who she was. In fact, she was someone he had never heard of before. Her signature blue hair and cold temperament were all too recognizable. It was precisely the description Baylor had given him when he warned him about who not to offend. Seeing that the situation was getting out of his control, he thought there was a good chance his operation would be revealed. Neither the association nor the Eye would let them off if they knew about the matter. It was imperative he kept it all a secret. However, Baylor had instructed him to not mess with the girl, so he hesitated, uncertain of what to do. The other two attendants used the opportunity Leguna's distraction offered to subdue him. With a long sword pressed against his neck, and his hair standing on end, he had no choice but to simply stare at Enlate without saying a word. He believed now that she had shown up, there was nothing he needed to worry about anymore. It wasn't that he had become dependent on her after the previous incident. Rather, it was because of a sense of trust he had in her. Trust that she would be able to bring him out of his predicament safe and sound. Even though the time he'd spent with her was short, he had come to trust and become familiar with her. As unreasonable as it sounded, he was certain of his feelings. "Leave now, or I'll kill the boy," threatened one attendant viciously. He had seen the girl dictate a level 5 barrier spell, so he knew he was nowhere near her match. He had no choice but to resort to underhanded tactics. "Release him now, and I promise I will not speak of this matter. Otherwise, I could kill you just as easily and get him out of here alive," countered Enlate as her eyes glowed azure. The room's temperature plummeted. White mist formed around her. The water vapor had crystallized instantaneously and formed a thin mist. Her threat was very effective. The three shivered from the bone-chilling cold as they looked at her, their expressions fear-ridden and angst-soaked. "Fine, release him," interjected Jord from a corner. He kept his eyes trained on Enlate, despite the drool leaking out of the corner of his mouth having frozen. It was obvious the perverted and cowardly young master had been charmed by the girl's beauty. In spite of noticing Jord's perverted gaze, she didn't react. She kept her neutral expression. However, the three fighters were horrified at Jord's actions and greatly feared that any reckless mistake the young master made would greatly anger the beautiful girl, foremost a terrifying mid-order magus. "Release him," cried the man to the attendant when he was no longer able to resist the cold. Since their master and the man had spoken, the two attendants no longer kept it up and shoved Leguna forward after giving each other a look. Leguna stumbled towards Enlate as his left leg had been harshly twisted. A bulge had already taken shape. While the pain from his injuries hurt much worse than that, he resisted the urge to groan. He didn't want to show any weakness. Already rather embarrassed that he had to be rescued, he wanted to keep whatever dignity he had left by not complaining like a child about the pain. Enlate looked at him. She noticed he could still walk and turned to leave without a word. Leguna followed behind. "My most beautiful lady, I believe there's been a misunderstanding about tonight's incident. I hope you can forgive us for our transgressions. Could you please tell me your name, so I can make it up to you?" asked Jor with the most magnetic tone he could muster. However, Enlate didn't bat an eye at him. Jord. She just continued on her path. Only Leguna turned back to give Jord a mocking stare before he turned and left. "Who was that girl?" asked Jord, not satisfied with how things had turned out. "Apologies, young master. We do not know," said one attendant. "Then you better find out." Now that only his attendants were left, Jord no longer bothered to act respectfully. "Young master, I advise you refrain from acting such. That girl is not the kind of person you want to offend according to Sir Baylor," said the man. He didn't want Jord to ruin Baylor's plan just because of some insignificant matter. "I don't think there's anyone I can afford to offend in Starfall. The women that catch my eye will all be mine," cried Jord hatefully. His underling furrowed his brow frustratedly. Leguna looked at Enlate from behind and said, "Well, thank you again for rescuing me." Enlate stopped in her tracks and turned around. She gave him a momentary glance before she headed off again. "How are your injuries?" "I'm fine. They're mostly superficial and will recover with some ointment," said Leguna nonchalantly despite his pallor. "Please, I can tell you're in danger of death if you're not treated in a few minutes." She could tell Leguna was understating his wounds and didn't like him pretending to be tough, so she intentionally tried to frighten him. "Uh-huh. Then I'll head back immediately to deal with my injuries. It won't do any good to look so bloody either," said Leguna as he prepared to sprint for Starfall. "Wait," and Latte called out to stop him. "Anything else?" After hesitating for a short moment, she said, "You'll never make it back in time to Starfall with your injuries. It's best you come with me." She brought Leguna to a house nearby. Even though it wasn't that large, the courtyard's vintage and elegant decorations were more impressive than anything a bum like Leguna had ever seen. "Do you live here?" asked Leguna, awed, as he looked at the courtyard. "Yes, but keep it to yourself," said Anne Latte without intending to waste words. She called for a servant to bandage him up. Meanwhile, she sat in the lounge and began to think in silence. She had been following Leguna since the previous night. Even though Wireless had only wanted her to gather experience as mercenaries with him, she didn't understand why the chairman regarded the youth so highly. In terms of status and ability, she was far above him and felt she was acting as his bodyguard. However, it wasn't an order by the chairman, but an act of her own intent. After today's incident, she also learned of Baylor's plans. While the guild had their own ways to deal with the matter, she still decided to write a report and have the servants deliver it to the president. "Ack," gasped Leguna after feeling the cold, numb sensation of the medication. He looked at the expressionless servant. "How long has Enlate been living here?" 12 years, replied the servant. His cold manner was an obvious indication of how Analot's personality formed. "Is that so? I heard she has a teacher too. I wonder where the great magus is." "The master is left to deal with some matters." "Is that so?" nodded Leguna. At first, he suspected Analot's identity, as her timely appearance in both of his troubled times were a little too coincidental. But after hearing the servant's testimony, which was consistent with her own, he berated himself for his suspicion towards his benefactor that had saved his life twice. In the following 2 days, Leguna recovered from his injuries at Analot's place. As he had already told Kurdak he would be off on a mission, his 2 companions didn't wonder where he was. He also didn't want to worry them about his injuries lest it disturb Kurdak's preparation for his duel. As Anne Latte was the one that suggested he stay while he recovered, he began to see the Glacier Girl in a different light. He didn't think she was actually such a warm person. He soon realized he was mistaken. She had indeed been caring when she invited him to stay, but she was by no means warm. While the girl wasn't as quiet as Cyrano's, she didn't do small talk like Kurdak or Vera at all. If there was no necessity, she wouldn't say a single word. It made Leguna feel awkward way too often for his liking. Though she didn't display the hospitality a host should, the medicine she used to treat him was pretty good. She used a grayish-white powder that accelerated his recovery greatly, probably even more than the elementary healing of priests. The powder was probably something fashioned by the mysterious alchemists. By the end of the first day, his cut scabbed. By the second, the scab fell off and revealed brand new pink skin. He left that night out of worry for Kurdak's duel the next day. After bidding Enlate farewell, he returned to Shining Star alone. That night, he had a good, long talk with Kurdak and Vera. They came to the conclusion that Kurdak must do his best to survive the duel. Whether he defeated Orwin wasn't important, so long as he was able to walk away alive. Kurdak expressed confidence in being able to do so, as Anne Latte had already sent him detailed information on his opponent. While the other two believed everything Anne Latte had said, she wasn't able to trick the experienced Kurdak. She had been incredibly forthright when she confronted him in a secret meeting in the afternoon. She had made her request to join the party. Not only did she admit she was a member of Moonshadow, she also handed him some documents on Orwin she had prepared. "Orwin is a member of your guild, right? Why would you help me?" he had asked, confused. "I admit he is pretty useful when with regards to missions, but his bloodthirsty temperament is too difficult to control. The guild doesn't like things we can't control. We don't lose much in erasing him," and Latte had replied. Realization had flashed across Kurdak's eyes. Don't lose much? Could that apply to Leguna as well? You're free to make your own conclusions. Enlate had only dropped an ambivalent answer before she turned and left. The next morning, a good number of people gathered near Starfall's eastern gate. Word of Kurdak and Orwin's duel had been spread all over in the past 2 days. Even though the 4 factions and some larger merchant guilds didn't pay attention to the commotion, the duel was quite the topic of discussion among Starfall's casino dwellers. Kurdak, a warrior of the 8th Stratum, had been taking missions with Cyrano's and Starfall since their arrival 8 years ago. Due to his friendly attitude and incredibly high efficacy, he was well regarded in the association. Given the inseparable nature of him and Cyrano's, some knew them as Starfall's twin mercenary heroes. Kurdak's leadership skills made him incredibly suited to serve as a squad leader. The Mercenary Association tried on numerous occasions to recruit him into their inner circle. However, every time they were refused with, "I'm used to lazing around at my own pace," as an excuse. At first, they thought he refused because they hadn't made a good enough offer. However, even after promising to let him take over a whole company, they were still refused. In the end, they realized he really did mean what he said and stopped trying to recruit him. While Kurdak wasn't a member of the association's inner circle, it appreciated his wide network among the mercenaries, so they had treated him rather well over the years. Orwin wasn't as good with people as Kurdak. Despite that, his reputation was probably far more widespread. 9th Stratum assassin Orwin was a member of Moonshadow thieves who occasionally undertook assassinations to make some extra cash. His reputation soared following the Brazoni's incident that had transpired a year ago. Brazoni's was one of the toughest strongholds built by Hawk on Lance. As most of the continent's inhabitants were exiles from Chino, they didn't hold much of an opinion about the empire. Both sides experienced conflict of varying scales in Silvermoon Forest and Pyro's Fields, located east of Silvermoon Forest. The most recent one had come to be called the Brazoni's Incident. Even though the two sides clashed often, it didn't stop trade between the two. However, the noble who held Brazoni's outpost was insidious and greedy, having once withheld a large amount of Pangder's goods. It forced the merchant guild to hire an assassin from Moonshadow in desperation to get rid of the noble and recover their goods. The one who executed the mission was none other than Orwin. While killing an opponent of the same stratum wasn't something too difficult, Orwin managed to sneak into the noble's mansion undetected and killed him without anyone noticing. Even though nobody knew the details, it was obvious from the state of Brazoni's that the noble had indeed died in the night. It didn't help that his twisted personality and ambitions were bolstered by his rising reputation. He didn't shy from doing any evil deed, given the fear others had of him because of his reputation. He had once set his sights on a farmer's daughter. Not only did he sneak into her residence to violate her, he even killed everyone there to silence them. There were also occasions when Orwin tortured beggars to death to sate his sadistic desires. He had developed a grudge for Kurdak because the man had stopped him from raping the daughter of a shop owner once. While he could be described as a crazed madman, he was so meticulously careful that many of his crimes went unpunished due to lack of evidence. Even Starfall's enforcers couldn't do much to him. It only served to inflate his infamy. Nobody dared to offend him. Today, Kurdak was going to fight that infamous assassin from Moonshadow to the death. It naturally attracted the attention of many Starfall citizens and mercenaries. Most were in favor of Kurdak, whether they were good-natured mercenaries or fearful commoners. They all hoped he would rid the city of the pest Orwin. However, there was still a significant group that supported Orwin. Most were hardened, twisted criminals. His amazing crime skills were exemplary to those criminals, some of whom studied the incidents Orwin was allegedly involved in meticulously like they would a textbook. Orwin was these people's idol. Regardless of the people that supported Kurdak, most would agree he wasn't Orwin's match. After all, Orwin was the assassin who managed to kill the noble in Brazoni's. The namesake was far more impressive sounding than Kurdak's. "Boss, why did you borrow money from me yesterday?" asked Leguna. He thought Kurdak wanted to buy some gear to prepare for the duel, so he lent him the gold without hesitation. However, he couldn't find anything different in his outfit. He couldn't help but wonder where the money had gone. "What? Oh, I invested it," said Kurdak cryptically. "Huh, Vera shot Leguna a glance, because Kurdak had also asked her for her savings. Neither knew what he had with the money. "Do you know how much the payout at the underground casino is for my victory?" asked Kurdak. "What?" The two looked at each other again and started to consider an unpleasant possibility which they weren't willing to express. 5-1. If I win, the payout will be 5-fold. Those blind fools don't think I'll win at all. I'll show them. I took out all our party's savings and the money you lent me to bet on my victory. A total of 580 gold. Hee, just imagine how much we will get. We're going to earn 2,900 gold today. Ha ha ha, we're going to be rich. Ha ha ha, laughed Kurdak heartily when he gradually caved from the excitement and anticipation. While Kurdak's smile was warm as spring, Vera and Leguna's expressions turned dark as ink the moment they heard what had happened to their money. "Darn it, you actually dare spend my hard-earned gold on a bet. You can forget about your duel with Orwin. I'll kill you myself," cried Vera as she twisted Kurdak's ear a whole 180 degrees. He cried out in pain. It hurt so much he wanted to do a somersault to get his ear untangled. "Give me back my money. Otherwise, I'll paint your name all over the inn." Leguna was also flipping mad at what Kurdak had done. Though he had just joined the party, he already had tens of gold coins saved. It was the first time he owned so much money in all his life. He had lent it with great reluctance in consideration for Kurdak's life. He didn't think the man would actually bet it all away. From the moment Kurdak revealed the truth, the two rebuked and slapped him all the way to the venue. When the audience saw he was already on his last breath, they secretly cheered for having made the right bet. Given that Kurdak didn't seem to stand much of a chance against Orwin in his prime, his loss was even more certain given how badly beaten up he was. "Oh, you're here. I thought you turned tail and ran in fear," mocked Orwin with a snicker when he saw Kurdak. Kurdak was feeling rather embarrassed as his two comrades didn't treat him like an ally in the slightest. Vera had already pulverized his left ear and was staring at his other one as if she was dissatisfied with their asymmetry. Leguna was even more active. He jumped on Kurdak's shoulder like a monkey. The only difference was that normal monkeys were rather well behaved and would pick out any lice they noticed. The youth sitting on his back was far more terrifying. His brownish-yellow hair had been ruffled so hard it became something that rivaled a bird's nest. Had it not been for his tough scalp, he would have turned bald by the time he arrived at the venue. With Leguna on his back and Vera holding his ear, he looked coldly at Orwin, who was currently wearing a disgusting smile. Most people feared Orwin, but not Kurdak, not after he had interfered with him half a year ago. Back then, Kurdak behaved as if he was going to face off against the strongest enemy he had ever encountered. After all, Orwin was the man who had killed the nobles of Brazones. But after a short fight, he realized he could actually hold his own against him. He wasn't nearly as scary as the rumor suggested. At the very least, there wasn't much Orwin could do to him during the fight. While there was a chance Orwin had been holding back, it seemed unlikely given his temperament. He was a man who'd tear anyone who ruined his affairs apart. Kurdak still being alive and well despite having offended him was a testament to the true extent of Orwin's strength. Coupled with the rejuvenation provided by the werewolf blood that flowed in his veins and his growth in the past half a year, Kurdak believed he stood a good chance against Orwin in a fight. After reading the information Enlate had provided, he was even more assured of his chances. The documents Enlate had given him on Orwin was incredibly detailed. The documents detailed almost every piece of information on the assassin, including his hobbies, fighting style, skills, affairs, and more. He'd spent a whole day studying them and made sure he grasped most of the important facts on his opponent. However, the reports didn't detail Orwin's alleged involvement in the Brazones incident. It made Kurdak suspect Orwin's involvement in the affair. Maybe he was just the scapegoat and someone else entirely was behind the ugly business. Every time I see that smile of yours, I feel an urge to give you a slap or two. It seems that wish will come true today, said Kurdak coldly. Did Enlate come? Asked Leguna as he looked around, still seated on Kurdak's shoulder. I doubt she'd be interested in the duel. Also, get down before I make you, answered Kurdak as he reached out and slipped Leguna off his shoulder. Boss, Leguna called as he handed over Flameblade. Take this with you. It's always better to be prepared just in case. Kurdak took it, and he nodded. His gaze moved to Vera, who seemed to want to say something. I doubt I'll need your bow and arrows. Oomph. I won't lend them to you even if you want them, retorted Vera angrily. It'll be all right. Don't be so anxious. What's so scary about Orwin? Just go order something to eat, so I can have a feast when I get back, comforted Kurdak with a smile. He headed off to prepare for the duel. Kurdak, what? Be careful. Our gold coins depend on you. Don't lose, okay? Though she wanted to say something encouraging, Vera changed her tone at the last minute when she saw Kurdak's mischievous expression. Kurdak was too bothered by the shock that all Vera cared about now was money to notice. While dueling wasn't a legal way to resolve conflict within a 9-cities federation, it was a method employed since days long past that had endured. The Federation had always been rather tolerant of duels. They wouldn't bother to investigate deaths related to duels. All they insisted on was that duels not be carried out in cities themselves. That was why Orwin had picked the East Gate as the venue. The two duelers went to an empty plot of land, and the audience followed. They encircled it, forming a ring of people roughly 60 meters across. People from the association walked to the center and announced they were there to bear witness and ensure the duel's fairness. They only gave a simple explanation of what they would do and left. They knew better than anyone. The crowd was already getting rather impatient, and nobody could be bothered to listen to unimportant fluff. Do you have any last words before I send you off? Asked Orwin as he drew the long sword from his back one. Even though a light and flexible dagger was far more useful for assassinations, longswords were far better suited to fighting a warrior like Kurdak had on. You didn't kill Brazones' lord, said Kurdak all of a sudden, before he roared and charged at Orwin. Though Orwin was surprised to hear this, a hardened assassin like him wouldn't be shaken by something so trivial. He only fell into a daze for a moment before he came back to his senses and focused his attention on the fight. A wave of impetus exploded from Kurdak's body, allowing the heavy two-handed sword in his hand to be waved around like a light bamboo stick. Void break slash. Kurdak gathered all the impetus he could into his two-handed sword. The blade radiated a faint glow. He raised it and swung it down vertically at Orwin. Void break slash was the skill in which Kurdak was most proficient. Skills were special techniques one could use to guide and apply impetus to one's moves. It was commonly known that, apart from strengthening the body, impetus could also be used to sharpen the weapon. Experienced fighters could use their impetus to raise their battle power greatly. Skills were unlike spells in that they didn't require mathematical precision. They were also not really dependent on the stratum of the user's impetus. That was why even a rookie third stratum warrior could use many different skills as long as he was talented enough. Naturally, that wasn't always the case. There were skills that required one to be at a certain stratum to be effectively utilized. Void break slash, for instance, was a technique where one infused large amounts of impetus into one's weapon to form a secondary cutting edge on the blade. Even though a weapon executing void break slash only struck once, its target would suffer 2 slashes as if it had been cut twice in quick succession. But if a person's stratum was low, they couldn't execute void break slash properly. The impetus wouldn't congeal into a cutting edge and increase the strike's damage. Leguna had long read a short introduction to skills in Wireless's notebook, so he wasn't unfamiliar with Kurdak's. Due to its might and imposing manner, Void Break Slash was a skill many mid-order warriors loved to use. However, Leguna couldn't execute it. Though his impetus was at the 6th stratum, his physique and build meant that he didn't possess the amount of impetus usually associated with someone in the 6th stratum. Void Break Slash was a skill that required a large pool of impetus from which to draw to form a secondary cutting edge. If he were to try to execute it, he might end up having all his impetus drained and experience severe fatigue. It wouldn't be long before he would no longer be able to fight. That was why Void Break Slash was to only be utilized by big-bodied warriors like Kurdak with great natural strength. Kurdak started off with a concentrated flurry of attacks. While he didn't fear Orwin after doing some research, he couldn't help but admit that his cold and unpredictable attacks were rather threatening. So, He aimed to seal off his movements altogether and exploit the advantage his large frame afforded him. He knew assassins who mostly snuck around to kill unprepared victims wouldn't have stamina to spare and intended to wear Orwin down. Reality played out as he hoped. His strategy was rather effective. Orwin struggled to dodge and parry throughout the fight without being able to deal a counter. Orwin was rather dumbstruck by how it was turning out. While he had already predicted Kurdak would attack ferociously from the beginning, he didn't think the huge man could grasp his footwork so accurately. With the chain of attacks, he launched, sealing off his avenues of escape before he could react, causing him to be unable to take even a short breather. He had planned to return a fatal blow when his opponent revealed an opening, but for some reason, Kurdak could predict his moves before he even acted. Where Orwin intended to dodge, Kurdak launched his strikes first. Had it not been for his quick reactions, the battle would have long ended with his loss. Kurdak's performance was already well beyond everyone's expectations. Though the man had quite the reputation in Starfall, being trustworthy and capable, people didn't really think he stood a chance against Orwin, who managed to assassinate Brazones' lord. Now that they saw Orwin struggling to hold his own, though, the audience felt rather marveled. Haggardly avoiding one attack after another, Orwin maintained his calm despite his dark expression. He refused to panic. Kurdak roared again as he raised his two-handed sword. When Orwin realized he was slowing down, his eyes widened and he retreated with shocking speed. Not only did he manage to avoid Kurdak's strike, he also moved more than 10 meters away. Huff puff. Kurdak looked at Orwin cautiously. He needed some time to catch his breath. His face flushed, or when he breathed with noticeable effort. Didn't think you'd enter the 9th stratum, but don't think you're the only one who broke through. In the next second, Orwin's speed was completely unleashed without warning. The most shocking part was that the impetus he used felt 1 stratum higher than Kurdak's. He had already reached the 10th stratum. One editor's note: it is highly debatable whether long swords and similar-sized weapons can actually be drawn from the back. But hey, since when have authors cared about physiology, right? Impetus was something in which every fighter had to train. Just like magic, magi with higher magic stratum would have more enthymema. As a result, they could release scarier and higher-leveled spells. In other words, one trained one's mind and brain to improve one's magic and enthymema, while one had to train one's body to improve one's impetus. One's impetus stratum manifested most obviously in a person's strength, speed, and reaction time, which improved in accordance with one's stratum. While Leguna looked to be rather slender, he would totally trump a well-built man that didn't have impetus. Orwin was well aware of Kurdak's might. While he appeared relaxed to others, even after being challenged to a duel, he hadn't dared to slack off on his training in the past 2 days either. And, much to his good fortune, Orwin, who was already on the brink of a breakthrough, actually managed to surpass the bottleneck due to the intensive training he'd undertaken and successfully made it to the 10th stratum. While it was only the difference of 1 stratum, it was enough for the slightest mistake to change the whole course of battle, especially for experienced fighters like the of them. Orwin's boosted speed and strength afforded him a huge advantage. Though Orwin had been put under huge pressure from Kurdak's flurry of attacks and wasn't able to unleash his speed to its full potential, he managed to secure an opportunity to widen the distance between the two. Naturally, he didn't waste the chance and hurriedly launched his counterattack after adjusting his posture. The longsword deflected the force of Kurdak's slash, allowing him to sneak to his opponent's left flank and thrust the venomous, snake-like dagger he held in his left hand to Kurdak's waist. "Herg!" roared Kurdak as his 9th stratum impetus exploded. While Orwin was rather resilient, even he wasn't able to withstand the sudden burst and was blown back. While Kurdak managed to escape the fate of being impaled thanks to his impetus burst, he wasn't able to stop the impetus blade formed on Orwin's dagger. He felt a wave of pain from his waist. Not intending to give up his hard-found chance, Orwin kicked his legs the moment touched the ground and relied on his high speed to entangle himself with Kurdak. What do we do now? Why has Orwin suddenly become a 10th stratum fighter? The situation looks pretty grim for Boss, thought Leguna as he watched the bloodbath. Don't panic. Even if Orwin's impetus is higher than Kurdak's, he's still only an assassin and won't have too much of an advantage in a face-to-face fight. Kurdak's not losing just yet, said Vera, but her worried expression betrayed her attempt to seem calm. He won't lose, said a crystal-clear voice amidst the crowded chatter. Annie? You're here too. Leguna scratched his head in confusion when he realized Enlate had appeared next to him without him noticing. Annie, do you have any idea what we should do? Asked Vera urgently the moment she saw the girl. Even though she wasn't older than her, Vera was hopeful she had something up her sleeves, given how powerful she was. Enlate shook her head. He won't lose, repeated she coldly. Enlate had already given Kurdak all the information she had on his opponent. Even with Orwin having broken through to the 10th stratum without anyone noticing, Kurdak could still make up for the disadvantage in raw strength with the detailed information he obtained. If he still couldn't best Orwin despite these circumstances, Enlate would truly begin to doubt her party leader's abilities. As expected, Orwin managed to gain a slight advantage by capitalizing on his speed in the beginning and put lots of pressure on Kurdak. However, Kurdak was an experienced mercenary who'd seen his fair share of battles. He got used to the quickened pace in a relatively short time before he relied on his precise movements to reclaim the advantage he lost. The odds between the two were rather balanced right now. Orwin never would have imagined Kurdak understood his moves so well. While his sudden burst of speed did push the battle in his favor, Kurdak managed to adjust and make the best decisions to counter his assault on the heat of battle and stabilize the situation. If the fight continued, Orwin would be unable to tough his way through a brute like Kurdak. Seeing that attacking ferociously wasn't doing him much good, Orwin brought out his trump card. He took out 2 smoke pellets from the back of his belt and smashed them on the ground. They were made by Moonshadow's armory. While they were not poisonous and didn't affect one's breathing, the thick smoke was still exceedingly useful for obscuring sight. According to the armory's tests, a human would only be able to see roughly 2 meters ahead when enveloped by the smoke. Some could only see 1 meter ahead, but due to their expensive ingredients, they were sold for 1 gold coin, even at a discounted price for Inner Circle members of the guild. It was why Orwin prepared some of them, just in case, but didn't really intend to use them if he didn't have to. He only did so after he was forced into a corner. The thick smoke spread all over in an instant. Kurdak felt as if the world around him faded into nothing but white. However, he did not rush to get out as he understood that acting rashly while unable to see was akin to committing suicide, fighting blind. That was one of the tactics in which Orwin was most confident. He had spent a huge fortune in Moonshadow to learn a secret art that would allow him to detect the enemy's position without his eyes. Even though he couldn't accurately detect every of his target's movements, being able to know the other's position when both were unable to rely on their sight was already an incredible edge. I wonder how Boss is doing, murmured Leguna, worried. He had read about some tips when it came to fighting blind from Wireless's notebook, but he wasn't aware whether Kurdak knew them or not. Don't worry. Kurdak isn't someone to die that easily, consoled Vera once more. However, she couldn't help but glance at Enlate as she said that, seemingly wanting to hear something else to support her words. Enlate retained her usual calm and didn't express the slightest panic at Kurdak's predicament. Instead, she was assured Kurdak would win the moment Orwin used his smoke pellets. That was due to the fact that one of the points she highlighted in the information she gave Kurdak was Orwin's ability to fight blind. She believed he'd already made more than enough preparations to deal with this situation. At that moment, Kurdak closed both his eyes. He knew keeping his cool was even more important given the danger he was in. He focused all his attention on his ears instead. While attacking without making a sound was one of an assassin's main skills, Kurdak didn't believe that Orwin would be able to give him a fatal blow without triggering any of his senses. The crowd's chatter began to quiet down as they held their breaths. The sudden change in the duel's tempo caused them to feel uneasy and anxious. Kurdak furrowed his brow in intense focus. He felt as if he had entered a trance-like state. His strong heartbeat was all the more audible in the silence. He could also hear a distant whisper, as if someone from the audience was talking in a hushed voice. All of a sudden, A faint sound of air being pushed away entered Kurdak's ears. Behind him on the right, "Arg!" roared Kurdak explosively all of a sudden as the impetus exploded from his body once more, forming a sound wave that spread out in all directions with him at its core. Battle Cry was the trump card Kurdak had been leaving for the crucial moment. It wasn't a complicated application of impetus. The user only had to focus their impetus in their lungs and release it in a loud shout. However, due to the huge force required for the sound waves emitted to cause actual damage, only high-order warriors would use the skill like that. Despite that, Kurdak was able to rely on his huge physique and large impetus pool to pull it off. He had already mastered the use of the skill back when he was only in the 7th stratum. Vera and the others looked tensely at the fog in a futile attempt to see what was happening within. All of a sudden, that ear-piercing roar resounded from within the smoke. Vera's heart skipped a bit when she recognized Kurdak's battle cry. She knew how much it strained Kurdak to use that skill, so if he didn't obtain victory soon after using it, then he might not have another chance to turn the tables of the fight. Before a second elapsed after the roar, a figure rushed out from the smoke in a haggard manner. When Leguna and Vera saw who that figure was, they let out sighs of relief. That man with shoulder-length hair was none other than Orwin. It could be seen that Kurdak still held the advantage even after being forced to fight blind. Orwin wore an expression of disbelief when he emerged from the smoke. Kurdak's battle cry had caused his mind to fall into disarray, and within that short span of a second, the kick Kurdak thrust without hesitation into Orwin's chest sent the latter flying out of the smoke. Kurdak's use of battle cry had already been far out of Orwin's expectations. But he was even more surprised by the fact that Kurdak was able to focus his attention to pinpoint his own location within the smoke. When it came to fighting experience, his understanding on his opponent, and his mental fortitude, Kurdak was far superior to Orwin in all respects, causing Orwin to realize that he had made a wrong choice to antagonize Kurdak. However, it was already far too late, because Kurdak's razor-sharp, two-handed sword had already been placed against Orwin's neck. It was the cold touch of the blade that caused Orwin to accept the reality of the situation. Kurdak appeared to be breathing heavily. It seemed that the use of battle cry taxed him quite a lot. While that skill expended lots of impetus in one go, it didn't cause that much damage to begin with. Its only benefit lied in its ability to be able to cause an opponent to fall into a short period of mental disorientation following exposure to the amplified sound waves. Had it not been for the kick Kurdak dealt Orwin, the assassin wouldn't have ended up that badly injured just for being hit by battle cry. That was the reason Kurdak used up all his strength in that kick of his that shattered Orwin's sternum. While he had used up all his remaining energy, he managed to subdue Orwin in the end. A troubled look flashed past Kurdak's face as he raised his two-handed sword gradually from Orwin's neck. "I'll spare you today. Scram. I don't want to see you in front of me again in the future," said Kurdak as he glanced mockingly at Orwin before turning to leave. Orwin coughed out 2 mouthfuls of blood as he looked at Kurdak's retreating silhouette. He stood up gradually, and just when the audience thought that Orwin would make his disgraceful exit, the assassin quickened his steps forward and pushed his dagger into Kurdak's back when the latter was unable to respond. "You spare my life? Do you think you can afford to do that?" hissed Orwin by Kurdak's ear as he wiped the blood at the corner of his mouth. The crowd broke into an uproar the instant that happened. It went without saying that Kurdak was the victor, though it should have been a duel to the death. If the victory was willing to spare the loser, the duel could conclude as it had. The problem lay in how the end of the match should be decided. One side would have to die fighting or be suppressed in battle so completely that the duel's witness declared one of them the victor and concluded the duel. However, while Kurdak did manage to subdue his opponent, the witness from the association wasn't able to announce the results in time. In other words, the duel still hadn't ended. That was why Orwin's sneak attack wasn't against the rules, even if the audience raged against it as being underhanded. "Shameless coward. How can there be scum like you in Starfall? You're so shameless as to ambush Kurdak, who tried to spare your life. Screw off. Starfall doesn't welcome shameless scum like you." After seeing Orwin's underhanded attack, The crowd broke into a flurry of curses and rebukes. However, they knew the rules and understood the duel still hadn't ended, so they didn't rush forward to take action. "Darn it! Orphan, you scum!" cried Leguna as his expression darkened. Vera was also enraged. She didn't understand why Kurdak softened at the last moment. She took out her bow and prepared to kill Orphan, even if it was against the rules. "The duel still hasn't ended, yet you try to leave without keeping your guard up?" mocked Orphan. He knew that regardless of the results, he was no longer welcome in Starfall. Since it had already come to this, he decided to go all the way and take Kurdak's life. Kurdak spat out a mouthful of blood before he mumbled something. "Do you have any last words?" "Don't worry. I'll make sure to dig your heart out and ferment it in alcohol," said Orphan as he nudged the dagger he had buried in Kurdak to intensify the other's suffering. The feeling of complete domination sent waves of pleasure and excitement racing through his body. At the same time, he pierced Kurdak with his dagger. He injected a stream of impetus into his opponent's body with the intent of causing as much damage as possible. This was one of the skills he'd learned. While the destruction of all the vital organs wasn't guaranteed, it was exceedingly useful for limiting the mobility of one's foe. Had it not been for Kurdak's staggering regeneration ability and his natural vigor, Kurdak would have already shut his eyes and awaited the peaceful slumber of death. He withdrew his dagger, took a few steps back, and prepared to deliver the final strike. The two-handed sword slipped from Kurdak's grip and fell to the ground with an audible clang. At that moment, he was barely standing and seemed as if he would collapse at any moment. "Well, I guess this is farewell," said Orphan as he calmed his breathing and leaped at him. But just as Orphan made his move, Kurdak acted as well. He suddenly drew Leguna's flame blade from his waist and swung it with a quick twist of his body. Orphan's face melted into a terrifyingly surprised expression. His stomach was cut open the instant flame blade crossed its path. His innards leaked out like spilled porridge. As what remained of his life drained away, he struggled to understand how Kurdak was still able to counterattack despite being so heavily injured. In the end, he couldn't do anything. He gave the world one last gaze, bursting with dissatisfaction, and collapsed in a pool of his own blood. "I didn't think I would be saved by Moon Sync's cycle again," thought Kurdak bitterly as he looked at his two companions scampering towards him. "Is that Enlate?" He could no longer see well. The injuries and loss of vitality fogged his consciousness. He struggled to take a step only to feel his vision darken before the world around him spun as he blacked out. Enlate pushed the panicking Vera aside and dictated a spell with immeasurable calm to check on the extent of Kurdak's injuries. A moment later, she looked at him surprised and nodded. "He's very lucky. Only his lungs were injured. His heart would have been pierced if the dagger was 2 centimeters off the mark." Next to them, Leguna had already prepared the healing potion and applied first aid to him with Vera's help. Enlate looked at Kurdak's wounds from the side. She was surprised that they were recovering at a rate visible to the naked eye. Her usually cold and indifferent visage revealed a rare, thoughtful expression. After Kurdak had been sufficiently treated, the association staff helped transport him back to Shining Star. Vera hired a mid-order priest and paid 10 gold coins for the treatment. Kurdak had finally been stabilized. The two were only able to rest after a long day of busy work. Enlate had helped them out a lot today, so Vera wanted to treat her to a meal. "Thankfully, you were there today, Annie. This cup is my thanks." While Vera didn't have high alcohol tolerance, she wouldn't have any trouble downing a cup or two with Enlate. I don't drink," whispered Enlate hesitantly. "Oh, come on, it'll be fine. Here, try a cup or two. You don't have to drink it if you can't take it, but you have to at least give it a go," insisted Vera warmly as she handed Enlate the alcohol-filled cup. As they were both women, Vera didn't order Flame's Embrace, which was Kurdak's drink of choice. Instead, she ordered the more refreshing fruit wine. But Enlate still regarded it with suspicion, even though it was light as juice as it was her first time tasting alcohol. Her ice-blue brow furrowed slightly the moment her lips touched the wine. Eventually, however, her expression softened. It was apparent that her first experience was rather pleasant. Leguna downed his cup ravenously. He felt incredibly parched from all the work he had done, and the low alcohol content of fruit wine was no different from normal fruit juice to him. It was worth noting that he had a good stomach for alcohol despite his small frame. Though he wasn't as tolerant as Kurdak, he was considered second best in the party. Cyrano's was no match for him either. "Wine only tastes good when it's drunk quickly," said he when he saw Enlatte only taking small sips. Enlatte looked at the purplish-red liquid with some hesitation before she mimicked Leguna and tried to drink it in one go. Her face flushed immediately. It made her look more alluring than ever. Her delicate cheeks seemed all the livelier with the extra trace of red. Even though she still wore the same cold expression on her face, the touches of color did nothing but accentuate her beauty. Leguna looked at her face in a stupefied trance. Though he had interacted with her quite a bit over the past couple of days, he still hadn't developed the slightest resistance to her beauty. It was not until Vera stomped on his foot and glared at him that he snapped out of it. "I have something I want to ask you too," said Enlatte. While her face was still reddish, she didn't feel any different. Both her expression and tone remained the same. "Go ahead," replied Leguna. Enlatte hesitated for a moment before she asked, "Did Kurdak use Moonsink's cycle?" The two started before they stared at each other. After a while, Vera sighed. "Since Annie's joined our party, there's no point to hiding this." "That's right. He has indeed used Moonsink's cycle." Enlatte nodded and confirmed her suspicions. Orwin's skill should have decided the match, but it failed to incapacitate Kurdak. After seeing his ridiculous recovery rate, she had a general idea of what was going on. Then Annie Vera tried to probe. She was uncertain whether the girl would leave the party now. Enlatte shook her head. "Don't worry. Kurdak seems like a good leader. I won't leave for something as simple as this. However, Moonsink's cycle is a kind of concoction that drains your life force while providing you with staggering vitality. I happen to notice Kurdak has only a little life force left when I was checking up on his injuries." "What?" Vera said. She could believe what she was hearing. While they knew from their experience at the Elven settlement that Moonsink's cycle would consume the user's life force, they didn't think it would be this dire already. 5 years at most," said Enlatte after some thought. "That can't be. Kurdak's always been so hardy. How can he have only 5 years left?" cried Vera. "Don't panic. Even though he only has 5 years left, it's still enough time to find other ways to replenish his life force," said Enlatte in an attempt to calm Vera down. "What methods are there?" pressed Vera hurriedly. Enlatte shook her head. "While I don't know for sure, there are many precious items that can extend people's lifespans. As long as we keep our eyes open, we'll get some kind of clue." "Is that so?" Vera knew Kurdak's problem wasn't something that could be solved overnight. Trying her best to calm down, she resolved herself to ask around about anything that could help. "Annie, your teacher is a high-order magus, right? Is there something he has that he could use to extend lifespan?" asked Leguna all of a sudden. "I'm sorry. My teacher left long ago. Even I don't know when he'll be back. I don't have access to his things either," said Enlatte as she made a reason up. "I see." Leguna wasn't too disappointed. He knew Anilot's teacher wasn't in Starfall in the first place. So, he asked without expecting much. Not to mention the fact that he was trying to ask a favor of someone without offering something in return. Even Kurdak would probably refuse free aid given his personality. The atmosphere for the rest of dinner was rather subdued. Enlatte had wanted to remind them of Kurdak's condition, but she didn't think it would unnerve the two that much. She felt a little guilty. That was the reason she didn't refuse any drink Leguna and Vera poured her. By the time they finished the meal, she realized she was a little drunk. "Hey, Lay, walk Annie back, will you? It's rather dangerous for a lone girl like her to walk back home in the middle of the night," said Vera. She had a feeling Leguna was fond of Enlatte and decided to give him a hand. "Come on, who'd seriously think of messing with an 11 strata magus like her? Even if we run into any trouble, it'd be up to her to protect me," said Leguna without much thought as he shot down Vera's arrangement with surprisingly sound logic. "Just do as I tell you. You dare talk back to me?" Seeing her efforts ignored just like that, she gave the back of Leguna's head a harsh slap and pushed him forward. Rubbing the spot where he was hit in a dizzy spell, he had no other choice but to follow Enlatte out of the inobediently in fear of receiving more of Vera's tyrannic wrath. Enlate felt rather lightheaded. Though her consciousness was still clear as ever, the floaty feeling of surrealism made her feel really, really weird. It was so weird that she didn't quite feel comfortable with the sensation. She guessed she was slightly drunk, but Leguna, who had drunk at least twice as much as she had, seemed completely normal. She couldn't tell whether she really was tipsy or not. While Leguna's face didn't show any of his emotions, he felt his heart beat as if there were a few huge men knocking on the inside of his chest. He was no fool. He had a rough idea why Vera had shoved him and Enlate into the night together. He suspected it was because she wanted him to improve his relationship with Enlate. But Sis thought he with a pained smile, "All you did was make me more nervous." While he had felt slightly awkward when he'd spent some time recovering at Anilot's place, he'd slowly gotten used to seeing her expressionless face. However, thanks to Vera's help, he felt more awkward than he had ever before. He had to admit Anilot's face and figure were top-notch. Coupled with her status as a genius magus, most men would no doubt be attracted to her. He didn't deny that he was one of them, but he knew better than anyone he was just a brat who'd climbed out of the slum's depths. He neither talented nor a person of high status. He wasn't rich either, and his looks, well, he thought he was rather fair, but his frame left much to be desired. While Enlate wasn't that tall herself, he didn't think a thin and short brat like him who only reached up to her eyebrows would catch her eye. If he were more honest, even he'd admit that he wouldn't find himself attractive if he were a woman. That was why he didn't expect much from their interactions. It was enough for him to catch glimpses of her stunning face as they take on missions together. Are you feeling okay?" asked he idly in an attempt to break the awkward silence. "Do I seem odd?" asked Enlate. "No, but your steps are a little off balance, like the steps a drunk would make," observed Leguna. "So, this is how it feels like to be drunk?" Enlate rubbed her temples with her fair, fine fingers. "It doesn't feel as terrible as I've heard it is. That's because you haven't drunk enough. If you have more, you'll feel much, much worse," explained Leguna as he recalled how it felt after his drinking match with Kurdak one night. Neither of them wanted to be the first to give up, so it ended with both kneeling over the toilet, vomiting for more than half an hour. "Really?" asked Enlate as she touched her slightly flushed face. It had started to snow lightly at some point, but due to her special constitution and the alcohol's stimulation, she didn't feel cold at all. In fact, the snow on her skin tingled refreshingly. "Oh, it's snowing," commented Leguna as he gazed at the sky. Winter had always been the most troublesome season for him. Melander's winter was far colder than Starfall's. When winter came, orphans that lacked food and clothes shivered in the chilling winds as they stared at rich and well-dressed people enviously. But now, his impetus increased his resistance to the cold substantially. He no longer feared the cold, and could for the first time appreciate the snow's beauty in spite of the chilling breeze that bothered him so much in the past. "Do you like snow?" asked Enlate as she looked at Leguna staring at the falling snowflake. What was he thinking about? Under normal circumstances, she would never bother to strike up small talk, but the alcohol had loosened her lips. "Not really. It's just that this is the first time I got to enjoy the scene," smiled Leguna. Enlate didn't quite understand what he meant. She suddenly realized she was acting unusual and clammed up. "Does boss really have that little time left?" asked Leguna as he brushed some snow off his hair. "There shouldn't be much time left," replied Enlate. When she had inspected Kurdak with her magic, she realized the man's body was regenerating at a staggering rate. The small blocks that made up his body were dying and regenerating nonstop. His body was a candle and it had burned from top to bottom. The flame that it carried was still burning brightly, but it couldn't last much longer. "Is there anything we can do?" "Anything at all." Even though Vera had already asked her about it, Leguna felt she would come up with a way in the end, but she just shook her head. She looked at him carefully. "You do anything? Aren't you afraid of the danger?" "I am afraid," Leguna replied without hesitating. He paused for a moment. "But boss saved my life. No matter what, I don't want to watch as his life fades away. I'm partly responsible for his decision to consume Moonsync Cycle. So, I'll face the odds no matter how dangerous. I know Sis feels the same. Though he didn't say it, he felt really apologetic towards his two companions. Had he not chickened out back then, he could have worked with Kurdak to come up with an effective plan to deal with the situation. Kurdak wouldn't have gotten so badly injured and wouldn't have needed to take Moonsink's cycle either. Is this what it means to be comrades? Asked Enlate as she recalled Vera and Leguna's reactions when Kurdak was hurt by Orwin. I guess you could say so, yes. It wasn't easy for me to find comrades. I don't want to lose them no matter what, said Leguna seriously. Enlate fell silent. The emotion Leguna felt for the others was foreign to her. She had met quite a few people during her stay at Moonshadow, but their relationship had always been between a superior and a subordinate. She couldn't fathom the camaraderie between mercenaries. Do you learn from your teacher all day? Leguna hurriedly changed the subject when he realized he probably said something wrong. Yes, I practiced the gesturing and dictating for spells, replied Enlate. Do you do it every day? Enlate gave it some thought before she nodded. All her life, she had been helping Wireless out with work. Apart from that, her schedule was occupied with learning magic. Oh, mumbled Leguna as a light bulb lit in his head. He had wondered why Enlate was so cold and distant all the time. Now he finally understood why. If someone did nothing but eat, sleep, and study, and never interacted with others, they were bound to end up as she had. What about you? How have you lived until now? Asked Enlate. Actually, she was an orphan herself. Had she not been taken in by Moonshadow, she might have had to spend her life as Leguna had. She wondered what sort of experiences a fellow orphan like him had gone through. Me? Well, I've lived all my life in the slums. It's basically been find food or starve, explained Leguna with a stupid-looking smile. Life in the slums was rife with hardships, but he didn't want to bring Analod's mood down by talking about it. They had a pretty good thing going right now. It would be a shame to spoil it. Enlate looked at him closely. While she had heard of how hard it was for an orphan to survive, she didn't expect him to gloss over his years of suffering by calling it finding food or starving with that idiotic smile of his. She suddenly realized she couldn't read Leguna's thoughts. The kid was a coward, but there were things for which he was willing to throw everything away. Even though he didn't have anything, he somehow still kept on losing. Despite having had such a tough life, he still managed to reflect on his experiences with a smile. The two fell into another period of silence. A little unaccustomed to the quietness, Leguna glanced nervously at Enlate. The girl didn't look awkward at all. Just as he was about to say something to break the ice again, Enlate said, I'm here. Thanks for walking me back. Leguna turned around. He realized they had made it to her house. He had wanted to make a little more small talk before returning, but he suddenly changed his mind and mimicked a noble bow a little stiffly. It was my honor to accompany such a beautiful lady, said he in the most refined voice he could muster. A little stunned, Enlate nodded before turning to leave. After seeing the beautiful figure disappear behind the door, Leguna made his way back a little crestfallen. He had made his bow and said his little shtick in the spur of the moment. He'd wanted to appear more refined, so she wouldn't have him as a mere crude and dirty brat, but he knew he'd failed after seeing her weirded-out expression. Don't nobles usually act like that? It should have been perfect, mumbled Leguna as he scratched his head. Enlate stood behind her door. Leguna's words drifted through it and into her ears. The corners of her mouth lifted into an alluring curve. By the time Leguna returned to the inn, Kurdak had already awakened and was chatting with Vera. You're quite the idiot, kid, mocked he the moment he saw Leguna. Apparently, Vera had just told him about how the kid didn't understand what she was trying to do earlier. How would I have known? Leguna mumbled as he scratched his head, before he added, well, I made up for it. Oh, the two stared at him with gossipy eyes. How so? Didn't I walk her home? And then, I came back here, said Leguna confidently. No, we want to know what happened before you reach your house, said Vera, slightly annoyed. Before? Well, I walked her home, answered Leguna, a little dazed. Sheesh, why is talking to you so tiring? I was asking about what happened on the way back. Vera screamed before she looked at him anticipatorily. Sis isn't counting on you to be smart. But you see, a young man and woman walking on the streets in the middle of the night, improving their relationship by talking about their worldviews and thoughts. Do you get what I'm trying to say? Ah, cried Leguna with an expression that spelled, "Why didn't I think of that? Idiot! I knew I couldn't count on you." The moment the two saw his expression, they couldn't help but sigh. Leguna looked at them, unable to say a word. "Whatever. I didn't hold much hope for you in the first place," sighed Kurdak as he looked at the kid's crestfallen face. He couldn't bear to say any more. After some consideration, he said with a serious tone, "Lay, we were just messing with you. Now, I have some proper advice." "What?" "And latte. Her background isn't simple. It's best you don't overthink this," explained Kurdak gingerly. Leguna nodded. "Boss, I know, I'm not overthinking anything. But she did save my life." "That could be because she had some other goal in mind," said Kurdak while he mocked himself secretly. "Did I have any ulterior motives when I rescued Leguna back then? I just hope you'll be a little guarded," warned he conclusively. Leguna kept silent. He nodded stiffly. Seeing him looking so unwilling to accept his advice, Kurdak could only shake his head helplessly. While the youth was rather wary of strangers, he still hadn't shed his naivete. He trusted anyone who had shown even the smallest kindness towards him without question. Kurdak was really worried that this naive kid would be manipulated by others easily, but seeing he was deaf to advice, he didn't say much. He vowed to look out for his little friend in the future, so he wouldn't be taken advantage of too much. "Boss, are you fine?" asked Leguna, trying to change the subject. "More or less," said Kurdak as he flexed his muscles. Since the blade didn't injure his heart, he would recover in another 2 to 3 days given the adept healing techniques of the priest that attended to him. "That quickly!" exclaimed Leguna, surprised. He'd seen Kurdak's wound and knew Orwin's dagger had pierced all the way. Not only did it cut his flesh, his impetus also heavily damaged his innards. Yet, he said he would recover in just 3 days with nothing other than the priest's healing. "Well, it's all thanks to Moonsync cycle. I've experimented with opening a wound on my hand. It didn't even take 5 minutes to heal completely," said Kurdak with a laugh. "That doesn't mean you can count on it during your battle. Turning away before the battle ended? You were practically asking to be backstabbed," complained Vera. The things that transpired during the duel had shocked her greatly. I didn't think Orwin would be that dastardly," confessed Kurdak, embarrassed. Kurdak had actually done that, so the crowd wouldn't think him a cold-blooded killer. While killing during a duel wasn't against the rules, if he'd really killed Orwin, who was no longer able to resist, it would no doubt have revolted at least part of the audience. It would ruin the reputation he'd spent so many years building up. So, he left the choice to Orwin. If he left just like that, Kurdak naturally wouldn't have stopped him. He wasn't too worried about Orwin's vengeance either. After their duel, Kurdak learned that Orwin was just a twisted madman, slightly stronger than the rest. Since Vera was always by his side, she wouldn't be in danger. As for Leguna, with Moonshadow secretly protecting him, the guild wouldn't let someone they paid so much attention to die by little Orwin's hands. And if Orwin did attack, even after being spared, he could kill him without worry for his reputation. Not only would he feel more relieved that he no longer had to worry about such a troubled person, he could even improve his reputation by removing such a pest on behalf of others. It was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. According to his understanding of the guy, he knew he would retaliate 9 out of 10 times. So, he paid attention to his back the moment he exposed it. He just didn't think he would be that fast. So fast that Kurdak almost lost his life. Fortunately, Moonsync cycle allowed him to remain mobile after taking the hit. Otherwise, he might not have made it out of the predicament alive. If it were before, he would naturally not worry about the views of some adventurers and go out of his way to bait Orwin. But ever since he consumed the odd potion, even though he didn't show it on the surface, it had become a major worry. He knew there wasn't much time left for him, and, while he didn't think much about dying, it pained him to have to leave his 2 companions behind. Even though Vera acted tough, she wasn't nearly as reliable as she wanted others to think. Leguna, on the other hand, Kurdak wasn't confident on the reliability of a kid that can't even flirt with a girl properly. Given that Cyrano's had left this world, Kurdak couldn't help but worry about leaving his two unreliable teammates to survive on their own in such a dangerous world. So, he came up with a way to ensure the two would have an easier time once he left. The reputation he intended to build was one of them. The Mercenary Association would definitely watch out for the two on account of his legacy. The other was money. He was incredibly confident in his chances in the duel, so he bet all the money they had. He had actually bet 800 gold instead of just 580. With Cyranos' death, the party funds had fallen to Kurdak. He had secretly pawned Cyranos' valuables behind the others' backs and got another 200 gold to bet. While he felt a little bad for Cyranos, he had to base his decisions on the ones still alive instead of brooding over the dead. Even if it would incur the other two's wrath if it were leaked, he would still make the same choice. And, in some way, he felt thankful to Orwin for that. He had already come up with that idea the moment Orwin tried to provoke him, and Analot's help reassured him of his chances. Now, not only had he eliminated an enemy that had a grudge against him, he also got the public's acknowledgement and earned 2,000 gold. He'd really outdone himself this time. Having earned so much from a single duel, he couldn't help but be tempted by the prospect of betting on himself after challenging other people. At first, Vera had wanted to lecture him a bit more, but seeing his pale face, she forced the words back down her throat and thought of something consolatory to say instead. Knowing that Vera didn't like to reveal her soft side, he thanked her warmly. He didn't dare tease her. If he really did in his injured state, he might really make her commit manslaughter. Kurdak remained bedridden in the inn, but he didn't get Vera to claim the gold he won on his behalf. He felt it was something he should deal with himself, and that it was better to hide the whole business from her. What made him wonder, however, was how Leguna didn't spend much time at the inn because of the missions the guild had given him, and how frequently Vera went out without bothering to care about a sick man like him, much to his displeasure. Actually, Vera was actively seeking out news about treasures that could extend one's lifespan. Ever since Imlate had reminded them of Kurdak's condition during the meal, she had been fraught with worry. She checked on him every morning as if she was worried he would pass away without anyone noticing. Every time she saw his face, she reaffirmed her resolve to find something to extend his lifespan. She had been going out early in the morning to visit places all over the city to seek out information. She could be seen in places like casinos, black markets, shops, inns, and guild plazas. Kurdak soon discovered this fact and felt all the more moved when, though he tried to tell her to calm down and take her time, she didn't let up. She even had a fight with him over the matter. Unable to do anything, Kurdak had to leave her to her own devices. He prayed she would cool down soon, though. He used the little free time he had left and visited the casino to claim his 4,800 gold reward, which he used to buy back Cyranos' items he'd pawned. He spent the rest of his rest days doing some light exercises before he turned to drool at the pile of gold coins. During the night, Leguna made it back to the odd job department. Sorum was there as usual. After observing the place for a few days, he'd gotten to know that it was practically Sorum's home. Though Sorum was usually the only one there, he had all his needs taken care of, from facilities to manpower. He could live there cooped up all his life if he wanted. "I'm back, Uncle." Leguna had gotten rather well acquainted with the fat, happy-go-lucky magus over the last couple of days. "Good. Nothing serious happened today, right?" asked Sorum as he dropped what he was doing. "Come on. What's the worst that could happen?" Leguna didn't really mind that he had been put in danger because of one of the missions. Had it not been for Analot's timely rescue, he might have lost his life already. When he reported the incident, the fat man jumped in terror. Since then, he'd only given Leguna simple tasks well within his ability. Miscellaneous jobs like finding people weren't all that dangerous to begin with. "Sheesh, you really gave me a fright that day," fumed Sorum, shaking his head. He didn't know the kid's background, but he came with Ariko's recommendation, so he didn't dare put him in harm's way. A little stunned, Leguna asked, "How are you going to deal with the mission? The deadline's just around the corner, right? What's there to deal with?" "I've had George somehow found out about his wife sending someone to tail him. They've been fighting nonstop ever since," said Sorum with a wave of his hand. "So, we're not going to do anything about it?" asked Leguna. "Of course. They've already paid, so what reason do we have to get involved any further?" especially if the requester is satisfied, answered Sorum, shrugging. But uncle, I heard something about an Orcish invasion. Don't we have to do anything about that? Persisted Leguna, his angst increasing slightly. Oh, that's what you're worried about. I've reported it to my superiors. They're the ones who told me not to make a fuss. Don't worry, I'm sure they have their own plans. It's not up to us to meddle in such a huge affair, replied Sorum. It's war. Can't we do anything more than just stand by and watch? Leguna still wasn't satisfied. The true culprit behind Cyranos' death was still on the loose. Sorum stared at him. Let Uncle share some of his wisdom. When the sky falls, those above us will bear it on our behalf. Small fellows like us don't have to worry about things like this. We just have to carry out our orders. The guild won't ignore this, so they must have their reasons for not taking action. There's no sense in panicking. Leguna opened his mouth, but couldn't find the words with which to rebut the uncle. He understood what Sorum was trying to say, but every time he thought Baylor causing trouble unabated, rage welled up in his chest. He knew the guild wouldn't bother with the personal vendetta of an insignificant cog like him. It seems I'll have to rely on myself this time, thought he. Uncle, what about the matter I asked you to look into? Oh, I asked around, Sorum said with a nod. Our guild does have something like that, but they're very rare. We only have a few. You can only buy a little, and the price is ridiculous. Don't even bother asking how much. I did manage to learn that you can get Millennium Snow Lotus from Ice Peak Mountain in the south. That marvel can also help with extending lifespan. Ice Peak Mountain? Leguna tried to remember what he knew about it. Having spent some time in Starfall, he more or less knew something about Lance's geography. Ice Peak Mountain was in the southmost part of the human realm. It was always covered in ice and snow, no matter the season. Though it was considered part of mankind's territory, the hazardous weather made it so only small parties of adventurers would go there. The only natives on and around the mountain were beasts and fiends. Though it was said that Millennium Snow Lotuses could be found there, Leguna knew it wasn't easy to actually get any. Otherwise, there wouldn't be any left for him to find in the first place. It wouldn't be easy to find it at a place like that, would it? He inquired gingerly. Sorum smirked. Naturally, Uncle wouldn't just leave you with a simple piece of information like that. I wouldn't tell you about this if I didn't have anything more to offer. Here, I even got you a map. As Sorum spoke, he took out a goat skin from the bookshelf behind him and handed it to Leguna. It was the map of Ice Peak Mountain. It seemed to have been made rather recently based. Look, it's here, and here, Sorum said as he pointed to the red marks on the map with his short, stubby finger. You stand a better chance of finding them here. Map in hand, Leguna felt more assured about the information's authenticity. He couldn't help but let out a smile. Seeing the orphan make such an earnest smile, Sorum felt his heart soften. The kid didn't really tell me why he was looking for something like that, though. Perhaps he's tempted by the sky-high price of such things? I better give him some advice. I heard that giant snow fiends make their homes on the mountain. It's better if you think this through. Huh, what are those? Leguna wondered. Sorum thought in silence. This kid was going to look for Millennium Lotus without knowing about the giant snow fiends? He formulated an explanation and began. Giant snow fiends are also known as snowmen. They're a type of fiend. They usually live alone, but at times a male and female pair can be spotted together. They're considered a little higher than mid-order fiends and are incredibly powerful. Sorum looked at Leguna's blank expression and knew that his warning didn't really hammer home. So, he added a few details. Their strength allows them to fight on par with a high-order warrior. Whoa, exclaimed Leguna. And they're also rather intelligent. Though they're not as smart as humans, elves, or other sentient beings, they're not your usual beast, Sorum said after some thought. I know more or less about the strength of your party. While you'd have no problems killing off normal fiends, giant snow fiends are still beyond your abilities. That's why I think you should reconsider your Millennium Snow Lotus trip. Is that so? Leguna said with a nod. I'll discuss this with Boss and the others. Thanks, Uncle. Oh, come on. All I did was ask around for your sake, Sorum said with a wave of his hand. Anyway, just think this over carefully. This is all Uncle can do for you. That's more than enough, Uncle. I will remember your favor, replied Leguna with a smile. These days, Vera seemed more frantic than ever. She had already been asking around Starfall for almost 10 days, yet she still didn't get any worthwhile information. Her efforts today were similarly fruitless, so she locked herself up in her room to wait out her bad mood. Knock, knock. I'm not hungry. You guys eat by yourselves, replied Vera with annoyance. Sis, it's me. I found something that can help boss, said Leguna excitedly. All Leguna heard was Vera's cry of surprise, followed by the rampant pounding of footsteps. He gladly told all he heard to the two over dinner. The two were just as excited to hear about the lead. While Kurdak had already mentally prepared for death, he wouldn't give up on the chance to live a few more years. But when they heard about the Great Snow Fiends, both their mood dampened quite a bit. Great Snow Fiends, huh? Kurdak said with a furrowed brow. If that's the case, I don't think we should make this trip. It's far too dangerous. But if we don't, your life, said Vera in a hurry. If we go, we might all die. The risk isn't worth it, said Kurdak, shaking his head. The three of us. Leguna said with a pause. What about Annie? Kid, I don't think I can convince that icy beauty to risk herself to join us on this excursion. It's not like this is a mission, Kurdak said with a shake of his head. Also, even if Enlate is with us, I doubt we'd have it easy. Great Snow Fiends are really fearsome. Annie will go with us, Leguna replied confidently, and we'll be much safer with her around. Even so, I agree with Lay. This will be much safer if Annie's with us, Vera interjected. Leguna added, Boss, do you think we could just sit around doing nothing and watch your life fade away? Kurdak looked him in the eyes before he turned to Vera. All right then, he finally yielded. If Enlate is willing to go with us, I'll agree to this excursion. We can discuss the details by then. Surprisingly, Enlate didn't voice any displeasure about their trip to Icepeak Mountain. When the group invited her, the Glacier Girl agreed almost instantly. Her nonchalant agreement surprised even Leguna. He had even prepared himself mentally to hear a logical and cold refusal. With a strong magus like Enlate on their team, Kurdak no longer had much to say about the trip. They spent the following days buying what they needed. As Kurdak made quite a bit of money from the casino, he was more than capable of arming them well. He brought Vera and Leguna to Hammer of Flame for a shopping spree. Tell me what you want. I'll pay for it, said he as he smacked his chest arrogantly. Oh my thanks, boss. Leguna really felt like running to Kurdak and wagging his tail like an obedient puppy. Just as Kurdak was about to boast about how he could afford to pay for what they needed, he felt a chill run down his spine. He realized Vera was looking at him with mixed feelings of adoration, attraction, and excitement. She pointed at herself without saying a word. What she meant was obvious. Since you're being so generous towards Leguna, I should get something as well, right? We're party members, so you have to act fairly. Kurdak didn't say a word and let his cold sweat fall as he clutched his money pouch subconsciously. After a moment, he finally whispered, I'll buy what you need for you. What? Asked Vera, having not heard him clearly. Well, Kurdak hesitated. Unlike Lay, if I let you pick what you like. You know what'll happen. Know what? How can you treat me like this, even though I'm also a party member? Also, 1,000 of the 2,900 gold coins you won should belong to me. Don't tell me you plan to keep it all to yourself, said Vera, dissatisfied. I returned the 200 gold coins I borrowed already. I earned the rest myself, countered Kurdak. He retreated a few steps when he saw Vera's eyes trailing on his money pouch. I don't care. If you don't give it to me, I won't leave, said Vera stubbornly. She just had to roll on the ground and throw a tantrum, and her transformation into a spoiled child would be complete. Speechless, Kurdak compromised in the end and agreed to let her pick her own equipment. At the same time, he shot the dwarven owner of the shop a begging glance. The owner was a dwarf named Muller who used to be a member of the Black Iron tribe from the Aeon Mountains to the southeast. A twist of fate had brought him to Starfall, and he decided to settle down. Given his casual attitude typical of dwarves, Hammer of Flame attracted lots of loyal customers despite its relatively small size, and Kurdak was one of them. Worry not, there are some things I won't sell. Dwarves don't take advantage of deals like that, whispered Muller on tiptoe to reach Kurdak's ear. Thanks a bunch. Otherwise, I think Vera will buy your whole shop, said Kurdak as he wiped his sweat. Why isn't Cyrano's here? Did he head off somewhere? Asked Muller when he saw only the three of them. As Vera had brought Leguna to the shop once before, he knew about the party's new member. He died in our last mission, said Kurdak solemnly. Oh, apologies. Cyrano's was a fine human, sighed Muller. How much for this bow? Asked Vera excitedly. The moment she saw the bow, emanating a light green glow, she stopped in her tracks entirely. The dwarf glanced at it. 800 gold. Kurdak had taken note of the bow as well. It must be another one of Muller's prized works. While it didn't look as refined as Laguna's flame blade, the elegant design and wind aspect enchantment appealed to Vera greatly. Kurdak had already wanted to buy it for her earlier, but he was worried it would awaken the demon in her if he took the initiative. So, he waited for her to find it herself, after which he would buy it after pretending to make a pained decision. What? Cried Vera, shocked. This dwarf here only gives fair prices. This bow is made of good quality stuff. Not only will the wind aspect enchantment boost your arrow's penetrative power, it'll even make the wielder's movements swifter and agiler. I paid an alchemist more than 400 gold just to have it enchanted. The price didn't even include the ingredients required. I had to provide that myself, described Muller briefly. It's still far too expensive, said Vera, as she shook her head. The price was truly a little beyond her means. While she knew Kurdak had made off with quite a bit of money, she was well aware that he had to put his life on the line to do so. Though a spendthrift she was, an overboard idiot she was not. Can it go for less? Asked Kurdak. Enchantment aside, its elegant design was quite appealing. He really hoped to see the majestic sight of Vera wielding the bow. After some thought, Muller nodded. All right, since we're old friends, I'll give it to you for 700. I don't get to earn much that way, though, said he through grit teeth. Deal, agreed Kurdak without hesitation as he took out a few notes. They were issued by the Federation and could be traded for gold coins at any of the banks they set up across the 9 cities. As the Federation was the de facto governing body lance's humans, the reputation of their banks went without saying. Kurdak, mumbled Vera as she looked at him, seemingly moved to tears. It's all right. The whole point of earning money is to spend it, after all. There's no point feeling bad over it, said Kurdak as he waved his hand. His eyes seemed to say this rich, old guy is spending money on the woman I love without expecting much in return. Just remember what I did for you well. No, I was going to say that the long sword over there also caught my eye, said Vera as she carefully pointed at an elegant-looking long sword hung on the wall. Kurdak was completely speechless. The day of departure approached quickly. As neither Kurdak nor Vera knew where Enlate stayed, they left contacting her to Leguna. As Ice Peak Mountain was quite some ways from Starfall, Leguna applied for leave at the odd job department. Sorum agreed without much fuss, but still felt rather worried when he learned where. Having a feast before embarking on a mission was a compulsory mercenary tradition. While Kurdak's party wasn't leaving on an official request, their excursion was no doubt one of the riskiest endeavors they have ever attempted. So, they found a luxurious restaurant and spent quite a big chunk of money on a decent meal. The only difference between that particular feast and the ones they held previously was the absence of a quiet man and the presence of a beautiful, cool beauty. Enlate wasn't interested in participating in the feast at first, but seeing how excited Leguna was when he invited her over, she found herself unable to refuse for some reason and agreed to attend. No alcohol was served during a feast of departure as tradition dictated. Despite that, the mouth-watering dishes served made Leguna wolf down his meal without any regard for appearances. Enlate looked at his horrible table manners without revealing her thoughts. What kind of person eats like that? Mused Vera, surprised, after seeing Leguna unleash his wrath. Thank you, Miss Enlate, for agreeing to join us on this trip, said Kurdak cordially, given how he was still wary of Analot's presence. She nodded to him. Mr. Kurdak, please don't worry about it. All my teacher wanted was that I train and gain experience. Whether it's a mission or not matters not. Also, since I'm part of the party, I should be one of your comrades as well. Both Kurdak and Vera were shocked to hear what Enlate just said. While she sounded cold as usual, the fact that she brought up comrade was out of character for her. They felt she'd changed somewhat. Even though they couldn't quite tell what had changed, There was a difference between the current Enlate and the chilling girl they'd spoken to before. They almost felt icicles forming when the girl spoke in the recent past. They then turned their eyes to Leguna. Since he was the one who spent more time with Enlate, he was most probably the one that influenced her behavior. "Hey, how'd you do it?" whispered Vera with a nudge. "Huh? Do what?" asked Leguna as he wiped the grease off his lips. "Doesn't Enlate feel different from before?" said Vera, as she pointed at the girl. After some thought, Leguna shook his head. "I don't think so. Talking to you really is exhausting sometimes," Vera said while giving the youth a good look before she mumbled, "I really underestimated your capabilities." The next morning, the party gathered near the south gate. Enlate was the earliest to arrive, much to the surprise of the other three who'd almost overslept. However, she did not reveal the slightest displeasure. She was as she always was, neither angry nor happy. Regardless, they left for their destination with a new member. "Kurdak, hurry! We'll arrive in Snorrock in an hour," urged Vera as she waved excitedly. She was currently wearing a large red cloak that matched her flame-red hair well. She stood out even more in the snow-covered field as a result. "You make it sound so easy. Let's see you hurry with 2 rucksacks," complained Kurdak with a pained expression. Unlike the warmly dressed Vera, one of his armor straps had come loose. Half his chest was exposed to the elements. His arms weren't covered either. While a human's constitution could be greatly boosted with impetus, giving them much better heat and cold resistance, extreme temperature wasn't harmless. Appropriate clothing was still necessary. Kurdak was dressed so lightly because he was hot and sweating, it was hard to walk through snow with 2 rucksacks on your back. In Laguna's own words, he'd probably sweat more than he'd urinated in the last couple of days. "All right, I know you're tired. Let me carry one," offered Vera guiltily after seeing the sweaty Kurdak. She took one of the rucksacks. She immediately felt uncomfortable with the more than 50 kilograms. "Annie's faring the best of us all," commented she as she stared at the dimensional pocket the girl wore on her waist enviously. Dimensional pockets were a kind of magical storage item that could carry objects far more voluminous than themselves without any of their properties changing. While the pocket wasn't that large, with just 2 cubic meters of space, even the smallest pockets cost 3,000 gold. They were a luxury frugal mercenaries could not afford no matter what. "Hey, that's enough envy for today. Had Enlate not let us store some of our luggage, we'd have to carry even more stuff," interrupted Kurdak, panicked, in a desperate attempt to change the subject. He noticed that Vera's expression was the same as the one she had when she'd seen something she wanted in a shop. "Huh, so you're aware only your load was lightened. Why do I have to carry everything myself?" mumbled Leguna with a voice as cold as Kurdak's. Since he was quite a bit smaller, his rucksack extended beyond his head. The huge thing didn't look right being carried someone so small at all. You have to think about it yourself," Kurdak said softly as he patted Laguna's shoulder. "I didn't think you'd be daring enough to peek at the 2 while they were bathing. I almost want to call you my boss. I didn't peek, okay? I was patrolling the area. I stopped by the lake for a drink. How could I have known they were bathing there? It's not like someone warned me." Leguna spoke only the truth, but he did feel his blood rush to his head when he saw Anilot's flawless back. If not for Vera squealing a moment later, he would have had a perfect memory over which to fawn. It doesn't matter whether Vera or I believe you. Anilot's opinion is what matters. She took everything of yours out of the ring immediately. I say that says it all," teased Kurdak. Leguna glanced at Anilate walking in front of him, carefully. She wore an all-white cotton robe, matched with her short ice blue hair and exquisite face. She looked as attractive as ever. Perhaps because she heard the 2 talking, a slight blush was on her cheeks. "Go on. Give her your explanation and see if she wants to carry some of your stuff again," smirked Kurdak. "Her pocket is almost full anyway. I'll be fine even without anyone's help," mumbled Leguna in a quiet whisper. Anilate had ignored him since the incident at the lake. He tried to make up with her several times, but she just flung him away. He'd given up on the idea of getting involved with her. He still kept on looking for a way to make it up to her, though, much to his 2 companions' dismay. They arrived at Snorrock an hour later. It was one of the southernmost human settlements on the entire continent. It was said that Snow Rock had been just a small town 100 years ago, but due to its proximity to Ice Peak Mountain, it attracted quite a number of adventuring lodgers. In time, the town evolved into one of the 9 great cities. Since they weren't going to stay for long, Kurdak didn't think too much about their accommodation. He intended to rent 4 beds for a few nights. Vera, however, was adamant that she wouldn't sleep in the same room as the smelly men and complained incessantly. While Enlate didn't say much, it didn't take a genius to realize she had no interest in sharing a room with crude males fighters. Leguna didn't take Kurdak's either. He insisted on renting a more expensive room himself. In the end, Kurdak had to yield and bring them around to look for rooms. Winter was Snow Rock's busiest season, though, and finding 4 vacant rooms was even harder than spotting a snow rabbit on the snow-covered grounds from half a kilometer away. In the end, the 4 settled on renting 3 rooms and an expensive inn. "My legs are dying," complained Kurdak with a mischievous expression. "Boss, if you don't wash your feet today, I'll sleep in the corridor," said Leguna sadly, but resolutely. "Ah, by all means, be my guest," agreed Kurdak without hesitation. Had it not been for Leguna, he wouldn't have had to spend 10 gold coins on such expensive accommodation, so he couldn't wait to take it out on him with his feet. "Ah, this place seems rather nice. We'll stay here. Don't worry, Lay. If Kurdak doesn't want you there, you can sleep with me," offered Vera. "Great. I won't sleep with boss then," accepted Leguna without hesitation. Who would turn down being able to hug Vera's supple thighs in favor of Kurdak's smelly feet? "In your dreams. You're staying with me," protested Kurdak as he dragged Leguna into his room without discussion. "Will we set out in 2 days?" asked Vera as she chewed on a piece of rabbit meat. Roasted rabbit was the inn's signature dish. Each cost 2 gold coins, though, so Kurdak felt like Vera was chewing his flesh. "Maybe. We still have to buy more necessities tomorrow. We'll leave after we have everything ready. We're going deep into Ice Peak Mountain, so we have to be as prepared as possible," said Kurdak as he snatched a rabbit leg from Leguna. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My young master has something he would like to discuss with you. I wonder if you would be so kind as to come over for a talk," said a man who sported a horseshoe mustache with a goatee as he pointed at the center of the hall. Kurdak looked in the direction the man pointed to see a handsome, elegantly dressed youth looking at him. The man revealed a dazzling smile when he noticed Vera glance at him. "Sorry, but we aren't interested," refused Kurdak coldly. This wasn't the first time they'd encountered such situations. While Vera only looked average, her eye-catching long red head of hair and bombastic figure roused most men easily. According to their experience, the people who approached them at inns were mostly intent on taking advantage of her. Cyrano's and Kurdak had gotten into many a bar fight over things like this. "Our young master is the eldest son of Daver's president. You know, the merchant guild? I hope you will kindly reconsider," insisted the man as he creased his brows. "I don't know about your little guild. We are dining, so I would appreciate it if you stopped bothering us," cut Kurdak him off with a dark expression. He had a feeling he was going to get into another fight. "Know your limits," said the man in a low voice as a chilling aura shot out from his body. "A mid-order warrior," thought Kurdak, surprised. The aura he let out was a cut above his own. While he didn't expect him to be so much trouble, it didn't mean he was about to let up. While Vera hadn't officially acknowledged the nature of their relationship, he'd been considering her his partner for a few years. This wasn't something on which he would back down. "Scram!" bellowed he coldly. "You really don't intend to show any respect?" asked the man as he squinted, his impetus lifting his hair. "What's wrong, Kugger? Our friends here don't intend to accept our invitation?" asked the youth, appearing nearby without anyone's notice. Kugger hurriedly retracted his impetus and bowed. "Young Master Daver, not only did they refuse your invitation, they even talked bad about the guild." "So, they look down on our guild?" asked Daver as he furrowed his brow. He'd wanted to invite the group over for some drinks because he was attracted to Vera, but he didn't think the lowly mercenaries would refuse him and even talk bad about him. "We don't need to trouble ourselves with knowing what Daver is," answered Enlate with her cold voice. As Kurdak's table was against the wall where the candlelight was dim, Cugger and the rest didn't really pay attention to the girl sitting in the corner. They only took note of her after she spoke. The moment Davor saw her, his eyes widened with interest. Just as he was about to say something, a cold glint flashed across her face. "Please leave. We have nothing to talk about." Davor's face paled, but he quickly calmed down. "I see. I have to apologize for disturbing your meal," he said with a forced smile. "Cugger, let's go." "Young master, why do we leave just like that?" asked Cugger, confused after they'd left. "That blue-haired girl isn't someone we can mess with. We still have things we need to deal with. It's best we don't cause any trouble," answered Davor as he shook his head. Cugger was shocked. Given that Davor was a magus of the 12th stratum, was the girl even more terrifying than him? He didn't doubt Davor, however. The youth was the household's most promising talent. Not only was he acknowledged as a genius in the arcane arts in Snow Rock, he had excellent instincts. Had he had a little less pride, he would be perfect. Over the many years he'd tended to Davor, he knew his young master had his reasons for insisting on leaving. It was why he'd left without another word when Davor said so. Davor, heir of the Davor clan. Lustful, but talented in magic with the water aspect and magus of the 12th stratum. Member of Eye of Arcana and of a mid-level merchant guild and family in Snow Rock, recalled Enlate. "They'll be fine, right?" asked Leguna as the chilling cold brushed against his spine. Even with impetus, he still felt petrified by the cold to the point that his teeth chattered when he spoke. Enlate turned around. She seemed completely unmoved, even in the temperature of -30 degrees Celsius. The cotton robe she wore was white as snow as usual. Seeing Leguna, whose fingertips and lips were already going purple, she couldn't help but stare befuddled. His body wasn't like hers. While she wouldn't feel much of a difference, even when the temperature was -40, it wasn't the same for Leguna, who was clad in only leather armor and kept warm by his impetus. The air was bone-chilling for him. It was already their third day hiking on Icepeak Mountain. As they wandered deeper and higher, the temperature dropped in kind. Fortunately, they were well stocked with supplies, so their journey was mostly without trouble. However, the incident that set them apart occurred 2 hours ago. They'd arrived at a point marked on the map as one of the spots where Millennium Snow Lotus could be found. It was a gigantic and seemingly endless cavern. Perhaps due to the unique properties of the minerals within the stone of the mountain, the cave's walls glowed with a soft blue light. Even though there wasn't any sunlight, it was as bright as day inside. As it was far too deep and not detailed by the map, Kurdak decided to survey near the entrance and leave if they didn't manage to find anything. After all, it was very easy to get lost in such a complicated cavern. But when the four were about to roast some meat as they rested, a 3-meter-tall, giant snow fiend charged at them out of nowhere. Had it been like before, Kurdak wouldn't have been confident that his party could take it. But as he had a mid-order magus on his team, they were strong enough to face it. In fact, the truth wasn't much different from his prediction. While giant snow fiends were powerful and hardy, they didn't have good resistance against magic. While he held the beast off with his shield, Enlate launched successive attacks from the rear. Given her adept handling of water aspect spells, it wouldn't have taken long to take it down. All went well until a second giant snow fiend showed up. When the second one appeared, Kurdak chose to retreat without hesitation, mainly because there was no way he could hold two back. The next half an hour was spent running for their lives. In the end, Leguna and Enlate managed to lose the two roaring brutes, but they realized too late they had become separated from the other two. Currently, the two had already been walking in the cave for a little over an hour. They hadn't spoken a word to one another until Leguna broke the ice. While Enlate was still hung up on his peeping, she knew it wasn't the time to mess around. I don't know. While great snow fiends are terrifying, they're not incredibly agile. It shouldn't be hard for Kurdak to find a way to lose them. Ah, thank goodness, exhaled Leguna as he rubbed his numbing hands. Enlate looked at the shivering youth. She hesitated for a moment before speaking. Are you feeling really cold? Leguna stared at her in a daze before for a moment. Oh, it's no big deal. I got used to the cold in my childhood, he answered hurriedly. He tried to make a relaxed smile to prove he was fine, but his eyes darted around as he did. He had never been able to maintain eye contact while he lied. White covered his eyes, and Latte had removed her cotton robe before he'd realized what was happening. Beneath it, she only wore a light, blue magus robe that accentuated her curves. "Wear this," ordered she. "I'm really fine," countered Leguna, patting his chest as he spoke. "Wear it. You'll be a burden if you get frostbite. Put it on if you don't want to drag me down," insisted she, slightly annoyed at his stubbornness. The sudden change in her tone surprised him quite a bit. "Aren't you cold?" asked he carefully as he carefully stretched out his hand. "I don't need it," replied she as she creased her brow. She was clearly getting annoyed at his indecisiveness. "All right, then." He stopped protesting in fear of her leaving him for dead out of anger. He put on the soft robe, which still had a trace of his companion's body heat. It shot him all the way to Cloud 9 in an instant. His sense of smell was unfortunately inhibited by the cold. If only he could smell her gentle odor, he was certain the feedback loop it'd grate in his mind would be incredible. In Latte gleamed something from the desire that flashed across his face. She glared at him, slightly embarrassed, humped softly, and walked ahead. Leguna cleared his throat before following awkwardly. "Are you really not cold?" "I'm fine." "Why? Aren't magi supposed to have weak bodies?" "Mine is special." "Oh, how?" "Nothing to do with you." "Oh, come on. We're comrades now, right? Tell me." "Don't feel like it. We don't have anything else to do." "I'm all ears." "Make another sound, and I'll take my robe back," exclaimed Enlate angrily with both her eyebrows raised. She finally realized the guy was more troublesome than Ariko's. At least Ariko's left crestfallen when she talked back to him coldly. Leguna was either completely oblivious or completely impervious to this approach. His skin's thickness could rival that of Starfall's walls. Leguna cracked a smile when he saw her annoyed expression. "That's better." "What did you say?" Enlate looked at him like he was a madman. "You look better now. I haven't seen an expression on your face, not once since we first met. You speak politely and pleasantly, but your voice sends chills down my spine. You look much better now you're showing emotion. That's how girls should be, right?" Laguna's voice faded when he saw Analot's eyebrows return to their neutral position. He didn't know whether he'd cheered her up or angered her. It was best he stopped immediately, and Latte looked at him coldly for a moment. She left without another word. Leguna didn't say anything either. He just tagged along with a heavy heart. He didn't see the slight smile on Analot's face. "Oh, aren't you the two from the inn?" sounded a familiar voice ahead of them in the cave. "Daver," thought Enlate as the smile on her face vanished. Kurdak and Vera's had it far worse than the previous two. They were chased into another cavern altogether by the two snow fiends. They had just started to think they'd found an exit when they ran into a cliff. Behind them, two snow fiends. In front of them, a cliff of unknown height. Either they're torn apart and eaten, or they take a leap of faith. They grit their teeth and jumped. They watched the snow float around them. They imagined they could dance amongst the snow. Unfortunately, reality was cruel. It pulled them back to reality and plunked them into a pile of snow. The two passed out as the world around them turned white. "Kurdak, brother, wake up." A familiar voice echoed out of the endless void's depths. "Who? Who's speaking?" "It's me. Did you forget me already? I only left recently. You have to wake up now." "Wake up? Why? I'm very comfortable as I am." "No, you can't fall asleep like this. Vera's in danger. She needs you." "Who are you? What's going on with Vera?" "She's in danger. She needs your help. You have to save her. You promised me. I asked you to save her from the orcs, and you did, but I also asked you to take care of her. She's in danger. She'll die if you don't wake up. Are you going to break your promise?" "This isn't like you at all." Kurdak finally remembered his name, but he wasn't so talkative, was he? "That's right. I promised him I would take good care of Vera. But where am I? How's he talking to me here? Don't tell me he's still alive. Why doesn't he save Vera? Doesn't he know how tired I am?" Kurdak had been greatly burdened ever since he'd left. He didn't have an appetite and couldn't sleep. He was very worried he wasn't strong enough to protect Vera. He was worried he would be ostracized thanks to his werewolf blood. He was worried Vera and Leguna would be left to fend for themselves after his death. He worked so hard in the couple of days before the duel. Neither of his companions knew how hard he'd worked to memorize everything Latte had given him about Orwin. He hadn't even slept, nor did they know that he'd saved the earnings from the duel, a few thousand gold, in a bank account under their names. They also didn't know about the idea the werewolf blood gave him. He continued to smile and laugh in front of them, but he wasn't happy, not at all. It used to be so much better. I had someone to talk to whenever there was trouble. I had someone with whom to share the burden. But now, I'm all that's left. I'm on a mission to find a way, to find out how I do endure the pain of being half werewolf. Kurdak was incredibly worn out. He could kill for some sleep. Even the shortest nap would do. But he couldn't. He didn't dare. He still had to care for the kid that called him boss unconditionally, and the woman who'd relied on him for 7 years now. He couldn't imagine how the two would spend the rest of their lives if he slept now. He just had to wake up. He had to fight. He had to struggle. Wake up, old friend. I know you won't disappoint me. Where are you? Come back. Cyranos. Cyranos, cried Kurdak as he sat up all of a sudden. The snow covering his face stimulated his nerves nonstop. The numbness in his limbs waned. His right hand still held tightly on Vera's left one, but when he turned to look, his face paled instantly. Everything in front of him was crimson. The white around it just made it look fresher. He suddenly remembered that Vera had been slashed in the back by the closest snow fiend while they were still running. They had been fleeing for their lives, so they hadn't bothered with the injury. While he wasn't badly injured, the long run and shock of the fall had possibly torn her wound open fatally. I really didn't think I'd meet you here, said Daver in an elegant and confident voice. He was fully certain he could take on the two, given the 5 mid-order warriors behind him and the fact that he himself was a mid-order magus. I didn't think so either, said Leguna as he stepped in front of Enlate. Though he knew even 3 of him couldn't match Enlate, as a boyf, as a man, he felt it his duty to protect the girl. Enlate didn't say anything about the gesture. She merely looked at him quietly. Daver glanced at him oddly. He didn't think a kid he hadn't cared for in the least would step forward with such bravado. I wonder what you two are doing here, he smiled. Is this a rendezvous? A tour? A training trip? A hunt? Or, Daver said as his gaze intensified, are you looking for something? Laguna's heart skipped a beat. They were indeed seeking something on the mountain. Given how Daver acted, he seemed to be doing the same. Could he also be looking for Millennium, Snow Lotus? If there was a conflict of interest, it appeared they wouldn't be able to walk away without a fight. While his mind stormed over the possibilities, his expression belied his panic. Our business is none of your concern, said he calmly. Young master, I think they're here for that, reminded Kugger. I agree. What do you think we should do? Asked Daver. Kugger gave it some thought. It's far too important to you. It's best if word of this doesn't get out. We should kill them. Daver shook his head. I told you already the woman isn't someone with whom we should mess. If we want to kill them, she might injure us gravely. That isn't acceptable considering what we would still have to afterwards. Besides, don't you think it'd be a shame to kill such a pretty blossom? What do you intend, young master? Just watch, Daver said before he turned to the two. Since we met in these caverns, it must be fate. Why don't we travel together? I believe you two have seen the great snow fiends lurking in these caverns. It'll be easier if we watch over each other. If I say no, asked Leguna coldly, I must apologize ahead of time then, but I'm afraid something unpleasant will happen between us, said Daver sharply. Leguna hesitated. While he hadn't his two opponents' discussion, he knew it wasn't anything pleasant. Given their current situation, nothing good could come of angering Daver. But if they traveled with them, they also ran the risk of being ambushed. Since time was of the essence, it wasn't a tough choice to make. He crossed gazes with Enlate before nodding. All right, we accept your invitation. You're welcome to join us, responded Daver with a smile. His gaze trailed on Enlate. However, he didn't spare even a glance for her companion. Vera. Kurdak slapped Vera's pale cheeks, but got no response. She was currently breathing rather weakly. It seemed if he'd slept just another hour, he would have just a frozen corpse for company. Worst case, he would have joined her. He hurriedly took out a bottle of healing potion from his pouch. He made sure everyone had at least one potion bottle with them at all times since Cyranos' death. His diligence paid off this time. He applied the potion as he'd learned from Leguna and dabbed some on Vera's temples. While he didn't have any stimulant to mix in, he still managed to wake her up. "Kurdak? Where are we?" "We're not dead," mumbled she extremely weakly. "Stop talking. Drink this," said Kurdak as he fed her the rest of the potion. It was too bad he didn't have blood clot grass and try-green leaf. All he could do was feed her the potion. After ingesting the bottle's contents, some color of blood returned to Vera's face. Even so, it couldn't help her heavy injuries much, though it wasn't their top concern. They worried more about the nigh uninhabitability of the place in which they found themselves. To escape the great snow fiends, the two had cast away their rucksacks. They currently had no supplies and no way to stave off the cold. Kurdak wore a cold suit of plate and some undergarments, so he was still fine. Vera, however, wore only leather armor and was currently injured. Without sufficient food, her body temperature would continue to fall. She would fare even worse if her wound frosted. Kurdak carried her to a small cave, just enough to shield them from the snow. After treating her injuries lightly, he started a fire. When he ascertained she'd be fine, he went to look for food. While he could resist the hunger, he needed to find some sustenance for Vera. "I'll go look for food. Wait here. Don't move around." "Okay," said Kurdak as he took her enchanted bow and prepared to leave. "No, Kurdak. Stay with me, please," Vera countered, shaking her head slowly. "I know I might not make it this time. Stay with me for a while." Seeing her pale face, Kurdak's heart clenched painfully. He knelt down and caressed her cheeks lightly. "Hey girl, this isn't like you. We've been through many times as bad before. We managed to make it this far, right? Trust me, I'll deal with this. I won't let you die just like that. Do you trust me?" Vera looked at him. She felt warm tears stream down her cheeks. She nodded solemnly. Even though she was usually headstrong and defiant, she was just as soft as most women her age would be in a dire situation. She knew their predicament was not as light as Kurdak made it out to be. They had no supplies, no help, and no map. They were completely lost and trapped in the mountains. Whether he was able to make it out by himself was uncertain already, not to mention her, injured as she was. But she couldn't just refute him. If a man made such a promise to a woman and asked her to trust him, would anyone be willing to refute him? Kurdak combed her messy hair together and cradled her head in his bosom. "Wait for me. I'll be nearby. Just give me a shout and I'll hear you. Don't worry, we'll definitely get out of here. Even if we don't, I'll always be with you, hell or otherwise." "Oh, so Miss and Latte stays at Starfall. Perhaps I could pay you a visit during one of my business trips?" Daver kept his elegant smile up and incessantly asked and Latte all sorts of questions. Though he didn't intend to leave the two alive for long, he thought it beneath him to commit violence against beautiful women when it wasn't necessary. It was a principle to him. "Whatever you like," replied Enlate coldly. Leguna looked at her in a stupor. Since they'd begun traveling together with Daver, he'd talked in a roundabout manner to extract information from them. But while Enlate responded to all his queries, most of what she said were bold-faced lies. Yet, the words flowed from her mouth liquidly. He didn't want to believe the cold, Glacier Girl was able to lie without batting an eye. Her cold expression spoke volumes about her willingness. All of a sudden, he realized he'd underestimated how dark she probably was. Thinking about the times he'd annoyed her, he couldn't help but feel chills run down his spine. As he was flexing his imaginative muscles, the bellowing of the great snow fiends echoed up the cave. Great snow fiends had a great sense of smell. They'd already picked up the unique human stench. Daver's face didn't reveal even the slightest hint of panic, even when he saw the snow fiends approaching. He glanced at one of his subordinates. They took out a piece of raw meat, white snow ice bear meat, an irresistible treat to great snow fiends. The two great snow fiends' attention was instantly drawn to it. The group prepared to leave carefully. While the cavern was a complicated labyrinth, they had already memorized the dead ends and could quickly find the route to their destination, even if they had to turn back. But the moment their backs faced the great snow fiends, their angry roars rang out. Leguna had flung his knife at the two as they'd started their meal. He was well aware of the situation. While the two were traveling as a group with Daver in name, The young man wouldn't hesitate to get rid of them given the chance. He had to create confusion for their escape, and the snow fiend arrival was the perfect chance. "You bastard!" Just as Davor prepared to rebuke Leguna, he realized the youth had already started running for his life within Latte. When he turned back to look, he saw the two great snow fiends scrambling over as they shrieked. "Hey girl, look what I caught," Kurdak said as he waved the snow rabbit in his hands. "Before this, it was Cyranos who prepared our meals. But today, I'll show you my cooking skills instead." Vera was as pale as before. "I bet it'll taste horrible," she murmured, trying hard to crack a smile. "That's fine. What you need is food for energy, so your wound can heal," replied Kurdak nonchalantly as he skinned the rabbit in a practiced manner. He had gotten quite adept at skinning after much experience with skinning fiends. He rubbed the skinned rabbit for a bit before piercing it through with a branch and carefully starting a fire with a fire starter. The fire starters the eye cells are really something. It can keep a fire going even in temperatures like this, nodded he satisfied. Seemingly affected by his optimism, Vera raised her head and smiled weakly. The roasted meat's fragrance wafted over as the rabbit turned from light pink to golden brown. Drops of grease fell from the meat into the fire, where it crackled and sizzled. "I didn't think it would end up smelling so good." "Oomph. Those heartless shops sell one roasted snow rabbit for 2 gold coins, but they don't smell as good as mine. When I grow old and retire, I'll sell roast rabbits." "I'll run them out of business," exclaimed Kurdak. He cut the rabbit meat into chunks, still but hurt about the money he'd spent at the inn. He handed some to Vera for a taste. "Give a try. We don't have any seasoning, so this will have to do." Though his culinary skills were average at best, the rabbit did taste rather good. The outer crust was crispy and the meat inside juicy. Whilst it didn't have any seasoning, the skill required to get the fire just right was something from which even fine cuisine could benefit. "How is it? Delicious?" asked he expectantly. This brutish man almost seemed anxious about how well his meat had turned out. Vera nodded. "It's very good. Glad you liked it. Wait a bit. I'll serve you the rest when it's done," said Kurdak happily as he wiped his soot-covered face and focused on roasting again. Seeing his serious expression, a wave of uncontrollable feelings surged in Vera's mind. Though she was heavily injured and the weather outside was horrendous, she had no trace of worry or anxiety. As long as she saw the dedicated man in front of her, she would be reassured and calm, as though his presence alone was enough to overcome all odds. Hardship was nothing as long as he cared for her. After finishing half the rabbit, color returned to her face. "I'll leave the last leg to you." "I'm full," said she as she handed it to him. Kurdak didn't hold back since he was hungrier than he wanted to admit. Additionally, he couldn't care for Vera if he didn't keep himself sated, so he wolfed down the last piece of meat without hesitation. "Yoo-woo, I didn't think something I roasted would taste this good," mumbled he unclearly as he chewed. "Humph, it has room for improvement. You only managed to get the fire right. You didn't add any seasoning. It's almost tasteless." Vera had started bickering with him again. Clearly, she was feeling better. "Hey, it ain't as simple as it looks. We'll have as much seasoning as we could want once we're back home. I'll roast you so many rabbits you'll vomit when you see one. I'll feed you till you're nice and chubby," laughed Kurdak. "You're the chubby one, you stupid black boar," cried Vera angrily as she threw him a punch. The swing's force made her tug on her wound. By the time she noticed, she was bleeding again. She furrowed her brow backslash as her revitalized face paled again. "You deserve that. Sit there and don't move," ordered Kurdak, slightly panicked as he knelt down to check on her. Her wound was more serious than he'd thought. Despite so much time having passed, it was still bleeding nonstop. Her back was practically entirely crimson. "Drink another potion," said he. He knew she had another potion. He wanted to save it for later to allow the previous effects to set in completely, but he couldn't do that now. He cleaned the wound again and used his bandage for some simple wrappings. Vera seemed a little better than before, but he was still incredibly worried. Given her condition, she needed at least 2 more potions to recover fully. Potion, thought he, frantic with worry. "The heck? Are you out of your damn mind? You've doomed us all," yelled Davor. Though he was breathing hard from running, He didn't forget to curse Leguna. "Don't put up that act now. I never thought you'd let us off so easily," retorted Leguna. The fellow had been pestering Enlate the whole time. Most of what she said in reply was lies, but it still made him feel rather displeased. He'd angered the snow fiends for two reasons. First, to escape Davor's control. Second, to vent. "Do you think I'll let you off now?" Seeing the snow fiends still some distance away, his expression turned cold as he launched two magic missiles at Leguna. Leguna ducked immediately, but as Davor wasn't that far behind, and given how narrow the cavern was, the magic missiles still struck his left arm. The force shifted his center of gravity and almost made him fall. Now they had completely fallen out. Leguna stopped holding back. He subconsciously stood in front of Enlate and flung two throwing knives at his target. Davor had been dictating his second spell the moment the chase started. It was a physical barrier that allowed protection from most projectiles. When Leguna's knives hit the barrier, they merely bounced off. They did Davor no harm. Naturally, Leguna didn't think he could take out a magus of the 12th stratum with merely two throwing knives. The moment he threw them, he drew Flameblade and closed the distance. Even idiots knew one shouldn't let magi put some distance between you and them. While it was only his first time fighting a magus, he was well aware of this principle. When Davor saw the blade that emanated a magical glow, his eyelids twitched. He didn't think a poor-looking brat would actually have an enchanted weapon. It was in that instant of disbelief that Leguna closed most of the distance. Davor really got the short end of the stick this time. As a magus, it was disadvantageous for him to fight at such close ranges, not to mention the cramped surroundings. Though he was 6 strata higher than his opponent, being assaulted at close range by a fighter with his opponent's speed was nothing short of terrifying. Leguna held Flameblade tight and quickly approached Davor. He traced an arc towards his throat. The blade traveled so fast it left a trail of light in its wake. Right before the dagger made contact, Davor completed his second defensive spell, the Stoneskin spell. It was a spell very effective against physical attacks. The great difference in their strata also made sure Leguna's attack wouldn't reap him much benefit. Actually, Davor knew it would take Leguna's 6 strikes at least to break the barrier. That his strike didn't do any damage at all was within expectation, but its force still sent him tumbling to the ground. His forehead was covered in perspiration. Had he been even a moment slower, Leguna would have cut his throat. The humiliation of almost dying to a weakling made him lose all rationality. "To hell with you." Davor flung 2 more magic missiles at Leguna to push him back before beginning another dictation. Enlate merely looked on from the side, quietly. Only 6 seconds had passed since the fight began. Since the great snow fiends hadn't closed in yet, she was more than willing to let the two fight uninterrupted. She wanted to see how Leguna would perform against a magus. As she predicted, he managed to suppress Davor the moment battle broke out. Terrain, distance, and weapons were all in his favor, but they should have been annoyances at best. The great divide between the two's strength wasn't something for which these factors could make up. Other things aside, a simple Stoneskin spell was enough to withstand a number of hits. And the moments it bought was more than enough to dictate a spell damaging enough to incapacitate Leguna. True to her expectations, Davor did just that. Dense amounts of magical power gathered at his fingertips. At first, they glowed a faint green, but as the dictation continued and more magical power gathered, the green glow turned into a ball of light that rested in his palm. The moment she heard the first verses, her expression changed. She realized he was going to cast a fatal 6th-level spell, the disintegration spell. "Die, you idiot!" Davor continued dictating as he roared the thought in his mind with a monstrous expression. He felt a wave of fatigue rush over him as his magical power was drained away. As long as he could finish the disintegration spell, however, the cursed brat would be reduced to fine powder and disappear from this world for good. Leguna paled. He knew how terrifying the concentration of magic in Davor's hands was, but there was nothing he could do. The 4 meters between them and Davor's stony skin made him despair. It had all happened in just a few fleeting moments. They both believed the result of this interaction had already been set in stone. There was one person who didn't think so, though. Just as the disintegration spell neared completion, a dark blue light entered the ball of magic. The magic Daverd gathered immediately began to dissipate, much to his shock. In less than a second, both his hands were completely empty. Not even a wisp of magic was left. Counterspell. It was a spell mutation technique, or as the Magi called it, mutation of magic. It was often used in magical duels and involved inserting a foreign magic source into an opponent's spell to disrupt their control of it, which would result in the gathered magic dissipating. Though it was a really practical technique, most Magi didn't have high enough control over their magic to make use of it. And Latte, apparently, could, however. "Annie," cried Leguna joyfully, having narrowly escaped death. Though she still wore that same cold expression, he really wanted to hug and kiss her cheeks. This was the third time she'd saved him. Faced with such a timely saving, he couldn't love her more even if he wanted to. However, she ignored his feelings completely. The great snow fiends are catching up before running off by herself. He was shocked when he realized what she'd said. He had been so engrossed in the fight, he'd forgotten to keep an eye on his surroundings. Now, however, he could hear the approaching snow fiend's cries. He stopped caring about Daver, who was staring at his hands, dazed, and ran after the girl. "Young master, run!" cried Kugger. He and the rest had wanted to hold the snow fiends back until Daver escaped to safety, but they didn't expect he'd still be seated on the ground, daydreaming. Daver snapped back to reality and saw the snow fiends quickly approaching. He got up in a hurry and ran as he dictated an agility spell for him and his subordinates. Thanks to the magic's enhancement, it didn't take long for them to catch up to the pair. "How can they run so fast?" cried Leguna when he saw the group closing in. They used an agility spell. And Latte may be a magus, but she was in a far better physical condition than one might imagine. She showed no signs of fatigue, even after doing so much running. Neither did she look tired when she spoke to Leguna. "We should use it too." The only thing Leguna was concerned with at the moment was putting as much distance between him and everyone else as possible. "I don't know how. I never learned enhancement spells. I specialize in curses and transmutation spells. I am a damage dealer," replied Latte. "I knew she liked violence a little too much," commented Leguna silently. The group caught up with the pair a few moments later, but, with the snow fiends right on their heels, they didn't say anything. The two groups just glanced at one another as they ran. "Darn it, it's a dead end." Leguna stopped as he stepped into a large space with no exit. There was nowhere to which they could run. "It's only two great snow fiends. Why should we fear them? Why don't we work together and kill them?" Daver was also losing his wits. This was his first time being forced into such a predicament by two beasts. His hate for the fiends had eclipsed his hate for Leguna. He considered dealing with them first before thinking of how he should settle his debt with the brat. All right, since the two were at a numerical disadvantage, Leguna wouldn't refuse Daver's offer. "Kugger, hold the male one back. We'll finish the female snow fiend off first," instructed Daver. Kugger and the other attendant crossed gazes before they rushed at the strong male fiend. The moment the female saw her partner attacked, she roared and tried to rush to her partner's aid. However, she suddenly realized she couldn't move. A fireball with a diameter of 30 centimeters came flying at her a moment later. A loud explosion rang as the snow fiend let out a painful cry. The sound of the first explosion hadn't even had the time to fade away when the second fireball came smashing at her. Bam! Boom! Bam! The snow fiend was struck 3 times in rapid succession. It was severely wounded. The stench of burnt hair filled the cavern. The fiend's burnt eyeballs blinded it. The pain it felt only served to excite it further. However, roaring and no longer caring about its mate, it rushed at the group. "This is bad. Fireballs aren't my specialty. I couldn't do enough damage," complained Latte Pale. She may be Moonshadow's foremost magic genius, but dictating a level 5 petrification spell and 3 level 3 fireball spells was still taxing on her. "Yep, she's in love with violence." "All right," confirmed Leguna as he watched her unleash spell after spell in a stupor. He rushed forward, flame blade in hand. As opposed to Leguna's surprise at Analod's violence, Daver was impressed by her accomplishments in the field of magic. Unleashing so many spells that consumed so much magical energy in 5 minutes was an incredible feat. Analod's dictation time for each fireball was just over a second. But the speed wasn't the only thing that awed him. He was even more impressed by her spell's might. By his estimation, each was easily 1.5 times stronger than his would be. There were many factors that affected a spell's strength. Stratum, for example, would separate a magus apprentice and a high-order magus even if both cast the same spell. The purity of the magic energy used was also an important factor. He felt her magical capacity was probably in the range of the 11th stratum. He was 1 stratum above her. However, the purity of her magical energy far exceeded his. That was probably why their strength differed so little. He gave her a respectful glance. Spell mutation techniques, super fast dictation, and terrifying destructive spells. And she even said fireballs weren't her specialty? He suddenly felt a so-called magical genius like him couldn't even compare to her. But, given the threat they currently faced, he couldn't afford to remain awed. He focused his attention on dictating another spell. As Leguna and his 3 attendants had rushed forward, he didn't dare to use a spell that had a large area of effect like the fireballs and latte had unleashed. He dictated some enhancement spells, such as Oxenmite, and an agility spell instead. Perhaps because of Anne Latte putting pressure on him, he didn't dare to pull any tricks during his dictation. Even Leguna benefited from his spells. Leguna carefully circled the sides of the battlefield. He was aware of his own abilities and knew he couldn't withstand attacks like those strength-based, shield-wielding warriors. Given his slight frame, he would be gravely injured from even the slightest touch of Great Snow Fiend. So, he kept himself in a position to harass the enemy by dealing attacks when the opportunity presented itself and backing down when it didn't. "Young master, quickly! We're at our limit," shouted Kugger. While he was a warrior of the 10th stratum, Nilio was only a warrior of the 8th, and it was quite hard for them to deal with the high-order fiend. One simple strike made Nilio feel as if his shield-wielding hand was about to break. "Just a little longer," shouted Daver. It wasn't hard for 4 fighters and 2 magi to fight a great snow fiend. The female's agonized soon rang out again. His eyes turned crimson as he flailed around wildly at Nilio with both his hands clasped together. Even with the reinforcement of impetus, his bones couldn't take the shock. He was turned into meat paste. Seeing his comrade killed, Kugger prepared himself for the worst and attempted to make his last stand, only to be flung to a far corner by a fling of the great snow fiend's arm. He wouldn't be making his way back anytime soon. "I'll hold it back. You guys hurry," yelled Enlatte as she approached the male snow fiend. She dictated her spell calmly, causing magical light to gather at her fingertips. Most of the spells she dictated were diminution spells like the grease spell and restrictive barriers. While they weren't damaging, they were ideal for buying time. But she'd underestimated the great snow fiend's strength. After the last cry from the female, the male roared maniacally, fueled further by anger. The restrictive barrier was like air. It no longer impeded the male at all. It charged forward and appeared in front of Enlatte in the blink of an eye. With a calm expression, she jumped back as she continued her dictation. The moment her spell was complete, the great snow fiend's palm smashed against her body and sent her flying like a piece of paper. "Annie!" cried Leguna. His heart stopped the moment he saw her flying. At the same time, his dark blue eyes turned lightless black.